which begets our budget, which is probably one of the most important things we all can collaborate and do together. So I hope you will tell your friends and family to please come and attend the next meeting. The more involvement and engagement we get, the better. But with that, I would ask you to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And following the pledge, you're welcome to remain standing for a moment of silence to reflect, meditate, pray, or pause for a moment. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I thank you all. And if I could ask the acting clerk to call the roll, please.
Mayor Alfin.
Present.
Vice Mayor Danko.
Here.
Councilmember Hyder.
Present.
Councilmember Clufus.
Present.
Councilmember Pontieri.
Present.
All members are present.
Thank you. And if the city manager has no comments in advance of public comment, is there anything you needed to say in advance of public comment?
I think Chief Berryhill is looking to give an update.
So
Mayor?
that's a good idea. So Chief, if you wouldn't mind, if we'll get you going first.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
Morning.
Kyle Berryhill, Palm Coast Fire Department. I wanted to give the council and the citizens an update with regards to residential pile burns. So this week, Community Development, the City Attorney's Office, the Palm Coast Fire Department, and the Florida Forest Service will be meeting as part of our preparation for a presentation that's coming to City Council on the workshop on June the 11th. At that time, we'll present some options to council for what you guys are able to do with pile burning and then how we would do it. There is some technical things associated with some of the options involved, which is why it's great that we have our new city attorney to help us through that process. In the meantime, we're going to continue to work with the Florida Forest Service to ensure that they understand the perspectives of our Palm Coast citizens, and our Prevention Division and Command staff are dedicated to monitoring the burning that is going on in the city today and ensuring our residents' safety. Occasionally, in these kind of situations, drift smoke does come in from out of the city or out of the county. So any residents that are concerned, the Florida Forest Service website has a dashboard on pile burning that's going on in the state of Florida, and they can check that dashboard to see if there's a pile burn around them, but they can always call the fire department with any concerns. It's our goal to help give you guys the best information so that you can help to make an informed decision for the safe future of our citizens.
Okay, Chief, thank you. And so the public knows that the Chief is directly responding to both public comment and public contact with City Council and others about their concern. So Chief has taken upon himself to check with all, to check the problem from every possible angle so that we can come up with a solution that would be a long-term solution and satisfy what our residents are hoping for. So thank you very much for that. We appreciate you're staying in tune with the public and what their ask is. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
All right, with that, we will move to public comment. In order for city staff to be able to respond to your questions or concerns, please fill out a comment card with your contact information. The comment cards are available with Brittany back in the rear of the room. Anyone wishing to speak may approach the podium, provide their name, and may speak for up to 3 minutes. Please direct all comments to the mayor. Be concise and to the point, avoid delaying or interrupting the proceedings, and do not make any irrelevant, impertinent, or slanderous comments. Any person who becomes disorderly may be barred from making any additional comments and may be removed. And with that, I would invite any member of the public that would like to comment on an item that does not appear later in the agenda. Please come forward at this time. Yes, sir.
Good morning, Jeffrey Seib,
The attention given by the council to the dredging needs of the saltwater canals and the proposed citizen survey has also shined a light on the condition of the freshwater canals. The freshwater canals, having been constructed at the same time as the saltwater canals, may also need some remedial care and attention that would enable them to be operating at their intended specifications for the next 50 years. Like the freshwater and saltwater canal systems and everything else, a growing city like ours is on two tracks, which requires attention to both the future new, but not here yet city, and the present existing city. In an era of finite, not unlimited, available financial resources, each track requires an appropriate amount of attention and resources. The question then arises, is that happening here? Are we expending our limited financial resources, including grants and appropriations, evenly between the two Palm Coast tracks by growing the new city at a reasonable, not blown out rate that takes over everything, while maintaining the community assets that are symbolic or representative of our city right here, right now? All cities realize, or should, the most important asset is the people here now, and those here in the future, and what that will be like for us all, both new and old, because it will just be one city one day. From an expenditure of city funds, our taxes, how much are allocated and being spent by city departments on the future Palm Coast versus the present? We have many issues here now not being addressed. Our roads need immediate attention. Another item is water and sewer. Big question, will we have enough water for several 100,000 residents? Even the St. Johns River Water Management District says the Floridian Aquifer, our water supply, is, quote, at risk. Rising sea levels and saltwater intrusion occurring right now in coastal regions, that's us, and overpumping by the thirsty growing population statewide is an issue best dealt with, or at least approached and studied now. A green city that we call ourselves, our water, our natural resources being utilized at sustainable levels are major components of residents' quality of life now and really forever. Let's make it real. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else in the public want to comment to me at this time? Seeing no one come forward, I will close public comment. Any comment from the dais?
I have none.
No, thank you. No comment.
Very good. Then I think we will move directly to our first presentation, which would be a year-to-date budget overview. So this is the moment in time where you will hear where those dollars and pennies have all been spent, where they have gone to. And before you get started, I assume that not only this presentation, but there are some ancillary materials that will be available to the public to support your presentation today, right? Very good, thank you.
Mayor and City Council, if I can, just to introduce the item before Director of Financial Services, Ms. Helena Alves, gets started. The preparation of fiscal year 24's budget posed many challenges as staff reduced planned programs and spending by $2.7 million in the general fund alone. The reduction was structured to avoid affecting strategic action plan priorities, public safety, and to minimize impacts on services provided to the community. Overall, the city froze select programs and positions and activities across all departments, including enterprise funds. Positions were frozen in communications and marketing, human resources, public works, streets, parks maintenance, and additionally, travel and training were reduced or frozen across all departments. Our Recreation and Parks Department reduced and froze programs, implemented seasonal hours for the Aquatic Center, and also postponed maintenance and improvements needed at the Palm Harbor Golf Course. Our Code Enforcement Division of the Community Development Department was reduced contractual services for demolition, structure removal, wildfire hazard mitigation, wildlife management, and driveway apron repairs. The city manager contingency was also reduced, as well as several planned fleet allocations. As stated earlier, strategic action plan priorities such as economic development efforts, the neighborhood safety study, and the comprehensive plan update, among others, were incorporated into the budget and are underway today. Thank you.
Councilwoman?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. If you could, Acting City Manager, at the beginning, you said that those actions were taken due to what?
It was the 2.7 reduction in our budget due to the millage rollback.
Okay, and that was directly because of the rollback?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Very good. Helena, if you want to go ahead and kick it off, thank you.
Yes, good morning, Mayor, City Council, Helena Alves, Financial Services Director. I have here today Gwen Ragsdale. She's our Budget and Procurement Manager, as well as Raylene Bauman. She is our Budget Coordinator. We're going to present to you the year-to-date operating budgets.
And just
October through,
just to help the public, do me a favor, just start off by defining the fiscal year. So when we talk year-to-date, it's not confusing to folks out in the public.
yes, we have that part of our presentation.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go to it.
But, of course, our fiscal year runs October 1st through September 30th. So the numbers that you'll see today will represent the first 6 months of the fiscal year from October 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024. Okay, so I will go ahead and turn it over to Raylene, and she'll get us started. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Morning. As Helena mentioned, today we will be presenting the year-to-date revenue and expenditures for the General Fund, the Stormwater Management Fund, the Wastewater Water Utility Management Fund, the Building Fund, and the Information Technology Enterprise Fund, as well as expenditures for the Internal Services Funds. We will also review our budget timeline and expected next steps. At the March 5th council meeting, the city's financial transparency dashboard was introduced, and we would like to take a moment to remind the public of this tool. The dashboard provides a transparent look at the types of revenues we collect and how we allocate public funds. The charts, graphs, and tables included are all highly interactive, and we invite the public to explore. You will find a link to this on the front page of the city's website. The budget staff has put together a quick reference booklet to explain city revenues, which contains a detailed explanation of each major revenue source used by the city. It also outlines the authorized uses for these funds and the legislative body that imposes usage restrictions. This tool was created to help the public navigate the different funding sources and understand their appropriate uses. We have copies here at City Hall, which are available at each meeting for those interested. We will now move into our year-to-date revenues. Helena will start by reviewing the budgeted revenues for fiscal year 2024. Everything we are presenting to you today is for the fiscal year 2024 budget, and we will focus on operational revenues and expenditures. We will not cover any capital or special revenue funds in this presentation. Since our fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th, the numbers you will see today represent the first 6 months of the fiscal year from October 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024. As we go through the presentation, you will notice our use of the colors green and yellow. The percentages highlighted in green are where we expect them to be at this time of the year. The percentages highlighted in yellow are still within the normal range, but we are providing additional information. I will now pass it over to Helena.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the general fund. As you can see, the major revenue source for the general fund is ad valorem taxes. We are at 93% collected through March 31st. That is typical for the city at this time of year. The deadline for payment is April 1st, so we will be receiving additional distributions from the tax collector in the next couple of months. The half-cent sales tax and the communication services tax, that represents only 4 months. As in previous years, We continue to monitor the state revenues and update any projections. The reason why it is only 4 months is that for the Government Accounting Standards Board requirements, the monies collected in October and November are to be recorded in the previous fiscal year. So we've annualized the calculations and expect to be on budget or slightly over. The state revenue sharing, that represents 6 months, and we're right where we need to be. Permits, fees, and assessments are running ahead of budget, but are comparable to prior year. This category includes planning and zoning permit fees, as well as franchise fees, both gas and solid waste. So the next category is transfers, which includes internal allocations that we record on a monthly basis, and the pilot annual transfer paid in lieu of taxes. This slide shows a breakdown of Parks and Recreation revenue along with other charges for services, judgments, fines, and forfeitures. So as you can see, most of the revenues are at the 50% mark or above. The Aquatic Center is at 16% with seasonal hours from February 4th to November 6th. We should see an increase starting in the third quarter as the weather gets warmer and school is out. So the Southern Rec Center has added 453 new members for the combo membership or pickleball, and 191 have renewed or signed up for tennis since the grand opening. The 64% collected through March 31st reflects those new numbers. Other charges for services include the town center deputy reimbursement, FDOT traffic signal maintenance, and quarterly mowing contracts, as well as lien search fees, among other smaller revenues. This category is running on target. Our next category, judgments, fines, and forfeitures. This includes code enforcement fines and administrative fees, hazard tree removal, fire mitigation, and the Flagler County Sheriff's Office traffic fines issued. This category is also running on target. So that is the summary of the general fund revenues. Do you have any questions before I move to
Just
proprietary?
remind me again the significance of the yellow highlight on this and the prior slide?
So the green is running on target. The yellow is within normal expected ranges, but we're providing you with additional information.
Okay.
So we'll move.
No, just, the yellow means we're not on target, correct?
Well, in this case, we are because the Aquatic Center just opened in February 6th. So you will expect to see your revenue pick up on.
Got it, okay, got it, I
There's
get it.
more information coming
Yeah.
to explain
Yes.
it better. Okay, good.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, just one more time with regard to the second to last line item on this slide with regard to sheriff's expense. What exactly does that contain?
So the other charges for services also includes the revenue we receive from the sheriff's office for traffic fines within the city of Palm
Traffic
Coast.
fines, okay.
Yes,
Revenue-
it flows through us
revenue.
through the Flagler County Clerk
Very
of
good.
Court.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question generally, and this could probably apply to the whole presentation. When we're doing these projections, are we considering the increase in population, or are we only looking at projections in comparison to the year prior? I mean, how are you all making the determination that we are on, quote unquote, on target?
So when we do revenue projections, of course, it's different than expenditure projections. Our ad valorem tax, or our largest source of revenue for the general fund, is based on the assessments that we receive from the property appraiser. So they would be current for property values as well as population. The state revenues, we receive them from the state. So they, throughout the summer, provide us with estimates of where they expect our collections to be for the following year, and we typically follow the state guidelines. As far as revenues for Parks and Recreation, Park Harbor, right, those we work directly with the department directors. You know, it is based on how many rounds they expect for the following year, how many memberships do they have, how many programs are they going to have, right? And then we estimate that revenue.
Okay, so is there any, I guess, policy or formula that we're dependent on that can help us plan in the future based on, because we have future population projection increases, right? Like, we know there's numbers that we're saying, we assume that by 2030, we're going to be here, based on whoever is making that formula and coming up with that figure, I don't know. But we have that, right? So when you all are budgeting and you're presenting these numbers to us, is there some type of formula or policy that you're also using internally to come up with these?
Okay, so you adopt the budget for one fiscal year, right? And what I described was your one fiscal year. So our long-term planning portion of the budget, we work with a projections software, right, that projects out 10 years. And it uses all sorts of data, right, from our taxes to our population growth to expected, CPI, economic factors, as well as things that are specific to Florida, right? So our sales tax growth based on Florida statistics, not necessarily from a different state, because, we are growing fast in Florida. So we have those, and that's our long-term planning. And that's where we see, if we see trends where we don't think our revenue is going to cover our expenditures, right? And we start having those discussions.
Okay, so that's helpful. These aren't arbitrary numbers that you all
Oh,
have come-
absolutely not.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question. Okay. Anyone else? All right, please proceed.
So now we'll take a look at our proprietary fund revenues. Water, wastewater fund is, so the charges for services here are typically behind 4 to 6 weeks, since utility billing is always for the previous month. So the percentage collected is consistent with prior years, and we don't really expect any issues. The same applies for your solid waste and your stormwater rates, since they are attached to utility bills. The building fund is at 35%. As you recall, we implemented a planned reduction in revenues to use current fund balance. That reduction was 50% for certain building permit fees, and that reduction is being adjusted to 10% of building permit fees in the third quarter. So you will see that revenue increase in the latter part of the fiscal year. The information technology is running ahead of budget, same as last year, and that's mainly due to contract dates and payments for cell tower revenues. They're not spread out evenly. It's when the annual payment is due. So that completes our revenues. Before we move forward, any further questions on revenues?
Just a little bit in the weeds, but in your third column, received as of March 31st. Now, there is some revenue funding that is pre-designated to be delivered at certain times of the year. In other words, it doesn't necessarily flow according to the calendar.
That is correct.
So I guess the question is, does it throw these numbers off? Are there any what significant revenue sources would be less dependent on the calendar and more by the definition of the revenue source? Are there a couple of big ones that we should be aware of?
So our revenue doesn't necessarily fluctuate. Our property taxes always tend to come in, right, in that November, December, and then January, February timeframe. The state revenues, our monthly distributions, our internal allocations we record on a monthly basis. The only item that you would see that would be like on an annual basis would be our pilot transfers, like I explained earlier.
Okay. So the percentages that you show are more relevant if we looked at prior year percentages.
So
Because
we added,
different arrival dates would be kind of smoothed out. If you looked at where we are as a percentage to the budget should be similar to prior years unless something was out of order. Is
that is
a better
correct,
way to look at it?
and that's
Okay.
why we added that percentage, so you could see that we are comparable to previous year.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Of course. Now, all right, so we are 6 months into the fiscal year, so we expect to be under 50% for our budget to actual for operational funds. Any areas of concern are highlighted throughout the presentation. We meet with city administration and department directors quarterly to review budget results. Some of common challenges continue to be the impact of inflation on the overall budget, increases in repair and maintenance due to aging infrastructure, and challenges in attracting and retaining staff. As departments present their individual overviews to council, they will discuss these particular challenges. I will now pass the presentation to Gwen, and she'll go over the details. Thank you.
Good morning. So, the total budget for administration and finance for the fiscal year 2024 is $5.93 million, and the total expended to date is approximately $2.5 million. So approximately 44% is expended. We don't anticipate any budgetary issues at this point. There are timing issues created by some subscriptions that are paid at certain points in the fiscal year, and the timing of hiring staff or implementing a new program or service. There are contracted and professional services that are either paid earlier in the fiscal year or will occur later in the fiscal year. These numbers also do not include Ms. Bevan's payout, which happened in April, nor does it include dollars for the search firm. So next is community development. It has a total budget for fiscal year 2024 of $10.7 million. The total expended to date is approximately $4.1 million, so approximately 39% has been expended. The building fund is at 37% due to contracted services expense that will occur in the second half of the year, as well as planned transfers to capital projects. Transfers will not be completed until the second part of the year. So the economic development is at 7% due to the budgeted position being open from October to the end of March. The city also issued a purchase order for business assistance as well as the purchase order for target industry feasibility studies. So you will expect to see these costs recorded in the third and fourth quarters. Public safety includes the fire department as well as the enhanced law enforcement services contracted with the Flagler County Sheriff's Office. And the total budget is $20.49 million for fiscal year 2024. The total expended to date is $10.6 million, so approximately 52%. The fire department actuals include a mobile breathing air trailer and the MEV vehicle grants that were budgeted in fiscal year 2023. The equipment was not received until fiscal year 2024. The Flagler County Sheriff's Office is also recorded for 7 payments, which also includes April. So Parks and Recreation includes the golf course, tennis center, the aquatic center, as well as parks maintenance. They have a total budget for fiscal year 2024 of $8.5 million. The total expended to date is approximately $3.7 million, so approximately 44% expended. Excuse me. The percentages fall into the expected levels except for the aquatic center. So this is due to having the seasonal hours as approved in fiscal year 2024. So the budget, you should see expenses catch up now that the pool is open. The Public Works Department has a total budget for fiscal year 2024 of $40.2 million. The total expended to date is $18.3 million, so approximately 46% has been expended. The fleet management budget includes $6.5 million of capital purchases. There's a significant lag issues with equipment and vehicle purchases. Currently, we still have $474,000 outstanding from fiscal year 2023 and $4.4 million for fiscal year 2024. And as you can see from last year's percentage at this time, the supply chain is moving a little better. So the water and wastewater total budget for fiscal year 2024 is $60.5 million. The total expended to date is approximately $33.6 million, so approximately 56% has been expended. So the department includes the administration division, the wastewater division, and the water division. These percentages are all in line. The non-departmental is over the 50% mark since it includes debt service, and these payments are made in the first quarter, as well as the transfer to utility capital projects for renewal and replacements. In the first half of the year, we also had some significant rain events. When this happens, our tank trunking expenses rise, and we have had to account for over $300,000 in non-departmental contingency for these expenditures. We continue to stormwater and engineering department. They have a total budget for fiscal year 2024 of $22 million. The total expended to date is approximately $7.3 million, so approximately 33% expended. The stormwater engineering includes budgeted costs for professional services associated with the L4, drainage improvements, the W1 capital projects, and once these allocations are completed, the percentage should be at 44%. Stormwater maintenance has the additional freshwater canal crew budgeted to begin June 1st, as well as the swale specialist position budgeted to begin June 1st. Budgeted overtime will increase during the rainy season, as well as other expenses to replenish inventory for draining pipes expected in the second half of the fiscal year. For stormwater operations, they experienced a vacant position for a portion of the fiscal year. The transfer for fleet equipment has not occurred yet, as well as recent purchases have not yet been charged for survey equipment, calibration, and other tools. The stormwater non-departmental capital project transfers will not be accomplished until the second portion of the fiscal year as well. Lastly, we end with information technology. This department has a total budget for fiscal year 2024 of $7.2 million. The total expended to date is approximately $3.6 million, so approximately 51% expended. For the internal services, they are at 53%, and this is due to yearly subscriptions that are purchased at the beginning of the year. That is all for our expenditures and expenses. Do we have any questions?
Just a question, again, back to the percentage column. So in the last fiscal year, if your percentage at fiscal year end ended up at 95%, what happened to that other 5%? Does that roll forward?
So any funds that are unexpended go into your fund balance, and once you're presented with your audit, you have your fund balance available, right, as presented by your auditors. During the budget process, we'll bring that fund balance back to you.
So it'll show up in this
policy.
year's fund balance as a starting point?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Questions from city council
That was
members?
my question. Thank you.
I have a few questions. So to piggyback on that point, if we go back to slide 7, which was the budgeted revenue sources, pardon me, and we have appropriated fund balance at 18%. Sorry, it's very small. You don't have to go back, I apologize. And I just for the public's benefit, I would suggest if you don't look at any portion of this presentation, slide 7 is probably the most important and informative for the public. It has the revenue sources and the ways that those can be used. But my question is, for the appropriated fund balance at 18%, what you just explained in response to the mayor's question, are those funds only funds that were not utilized last year that we had budgeted for? Or does it also encompass other funds?
So your appropriated fund balance in this chart is citywide, not specific to a fund, right? So for your capital projects funds, any balance left from projects or balance that is being saved for projects, right, would be under that appropriated fund balance. The same for your proprietary funds, right? Any unspent funds or planned, usage of fund balance for capital expenditures within those proprietary funds will be part of that appropriated fund balance number. And then for the general fund, any usage of fund balance as per policy, right, one-time usage or for capital projects will also be part of that.
Okay, so then presumably within that 18%, we then have separate pies for how those funds can be utilized based on the kind of, we'll call it a sub-fund that they're in, correct?
That is correct.
Got it, okay. With regards to some of the expenses, you mentioned that for admin and finance, the current expenditures do not include Ms. Bevan's payout and then the firm that we hire to look for a permanent city manager, correct?
That is correct.
What was her payout?
1 second. So for total expenses, right, including payroll taxes and retirement, right, it's approximately $174,000.
And that's not included in this budget yet?
No.
Okay. For the slide with regards to Parks and Rec, my question about the Aquatic Center, because I understand what you're saying about us basing the expenditures on seasonality. That makes complete sense to me. But this happens every year. So how is it that we're still not on target, knowing that every year we're still going to have this seasonality kind of conundrum? It's still, I guess it's not green, right? We're not exactly where we think we should be, even though we encounter the same trend every year.
Okay, so this is one of those budgets where we're taking the aquatic center budget, just like all the other operating departments of the city, and we're dividing it by 12, and we're assuming that 6 months should be at 50%, right? In this case, you've got a facility that's not open for 12 months, right? And it really going to see the heavy expenditures in a 5-month period. So mathematically,
Well, I get the mathematics of it, but this is a trend that we talk about every single year based on the seasonality of this amenity. So I guess my question is, have there and I see Mr. Hurst coming up, thank you, but have there actually been more expenditures that we've encountered that we actually anticipated because of the age of the aquatic center? Is any of that coming into play rather than this just being a seasonality thing? Because to me, if it's a seasonality thing that we encounter every single year, then it should be right on target or pretty close there too.
So usually when we have this season, we do let a lot of our staff, a lot of this expenditures in Q3 include bringing on more lifeguards. So when, the season as it ends, lifeguards go to college, they get other jobs and everything. So then come around this month, end of this month, early May, we see a lot more of our seasonal staff come back, or we hire more lifeguards, which kind of gets our numbers back up for the next 2 quarters.
And just for a note, the way I've always viewed the fact that it's yellow is it kind of prevents, and no disrespect at all, just the checks and balances. It doesn't allow our staff to kind of move the goalposts on where they expect it to be, but it's just a very literal divided by 12 type formula. But I absolutely see where you're coming from, because it's the same recurring thing. Then, it should be green, but I understand that it would require a bit more subjectivity to kind of say, hey, we are on schedule, even though technically we're not if we're using a straight divided by 12 formula. That's always how I justify it.
Typically, you could customize every line item in the budget subject to its idiosyncrasies to some extent. Even golf, for example, if you had, a rainy season that was exceptional last year, you may want to take that into account the following year. So it would be great if we could identify the formula that profiled the idiosyncrasy of each line item well, but I guess early in the SAP process here, I guess we know a starting point, and maybe with footnotes we could better explain so that it pops out. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at line items and having to know that one was calculated this way, that one was calculated another way.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out is, have we literally had more expenses than anticipated for the aquatic center? Or is the fact that the expenditures are higher now versus other years?
Has it been yellow every year, maybe?
Correct, sure. I mean, that's a good question too. Because again, if we are projecting that at this time of year, it should only be XYZ because of seasonality, then there should be nothing abnormal about that. But you are stating, because it is, and it doesn't matter if it's yellow, pink, purple, green, right? You're still stating this requires further explanation. But if this is something that's anticipated every year, why the further explanation? Have there actually been more expenses? And I ask this because we have conversations out there right now about taking over Belterre, which we can't do legally, but, well, why don't we just take over the aquatic center, the pool in Belterre, or why don't we push for a pool with the new YMCA? I'm trying to figure out the expenditures versus the revenues and how unpredictable this fund seems to be year after year because of the age of this center.
Yeah, so even though we are seasonal, we still need to maintain the water quality of the pool. So obviously, even we close November, so December, January, then we opened up in February. So obviously, starting February, there's propane that we had to heat the pool. But then in December, January, we didn't use propane, but then we still had to, chemicals, we still had to kind of maintain the quality. So come February, we're ready to go to open up. So usually, propane may be the biggest, probably most likely contributed is 37 because we did open in February.
Okay.
But usually we still maintain the pool throughout the closed months as we do during the summer.
Okay.
So
I only ask because I want to be able to budget. I want us to be able to continue to provide this amenity. But to me, it always seems like the revenue's not quite there and the expenditures are always kind of sucking the life from us. So I'm trying to figure out how we can get to this good balance so that we can continue to provide this service to our residents.
And we continue to look at that every year, starting Q3, right now we have swim lessons starting. And that's going to continue throughout. We do try and do private swim lessons in the winter as well. Try to do some Zumba classes. We try and get these programs in, so we do see some of the revenue tick up. But usually, about Q3, April, May, June, July, August, September, that's where we see kind of majority of our revenue increase.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
And then I have one more question, sorry. For the expenses in stormwater, you mentioned a 44% figure. Can you explain that again for me?
So for stormwater engineering, there are professional services costs that are within the project portion of it. So once those budgets are moved to capital, that percentage will be at 44%. But Carl can answer that a lot better than I can.
Correct. We had a sum of dollars in those professional funds under contract services, and those transfers, we had transferred some funds out to those two capital projects. So that 30-something% didn't include those transfers out for those specific capital projects. So if you added in that those two transfers were spent and transferred, then they have been encumbered. They just didn't show up in this report yet because of the timing. So if it was recalculated with those transfers occurring, it would have been 44%.
Okay, so what you're saying is even though the column that says the percentages that have been spent so far are in the 30s, in actuality, when we look at what will be accounted for, they're closer to 44% total.
Correct.
Stormwater engineering line.
Yes.
Oh, just for the
Just the
stormwater
engineering line.
That is
Got
correct.
it. Okay, that's helpful. All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Carl.
That gets good. Okay, good catch. Okay.
Okay.
I think that, anyone else, another question at this point?
No questions.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I will turn it back over to Raylene.
Say it again?
We will turn it back over to Raylene.
We will not go over the timeline in detail today. However, we did want to cover what has been completed and the next steps. During the months of February and March, Council has met with a consultant for your annual strategic action plan evaluation. March 19th was the annual financial audit presentation, and March 26th was a review of the 10-year capital improvement plan and department overviews from fire and community development. As you can see, we have a lot on the calendar from May until September. There are many budget workshops scheduled. We will come back to council on May 28th for the department overviews for water, wastewater, stormwater, public works, and parks and recreation. We wanted to remind the public where they can find all of our budget information. As in previous years, we have set up the fiscal year 2024 budget preparation link on the city's website. This is where we will post all of our presentations, the budget calendar, and any supporting documentation as we move through the budget process. We work with the communications team to make sure we are keeping the public updated on where to find all this great information. And this completes our presentation if you have any additional questions.
I'm sorry, just, if you would just highlight for me, on the city website, this can be found where, if you go to the opening page,
Yep, it's on the front page towards the bottom. It's a tile, and you just click the tile.
and
it
what
takes-
does, what does the tile say?
It's that right there.
This is the
2025.
tile that they would look for on the opening page. Thank you.
That is
Perfect.
correct.
Good. Okay.
Of course.
And this takes you to the new transparency dashboard as well, correct?
So it is in the same portion of the website, but it has its own separate tile, so you'll see them too.
Which is a new feature fully published this fiscal period.
Yes, that is
Very
correct.
good. So I'll
Yeah,
hope
in
everybody would take
February.
advantage of that. Thank you. Very good.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, does that conclude your presentation? Before you leave, any final questions from staff? I mean, they do a great job putting together all those numbers in a relatively easy fashion to look at. Appreciate that. City Manager, any question, any comment?
No, Mayor, the next thing that's coming up as far as your special budget workshop is May 28th, and you'll hear a series of department overviews, and you'll get more in the weeds in the details of the departments at that time.
Very good. All right.
Thank you very
Ladies,
much.
thank you very much for
Thank
the
you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Mayor, public comment?
So I will open up this presentation for public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on the presentation that was just provided? Yes, sir.
Jeffrey Saib, again. I have a question, not a comment. You know, it was either last week or maybe the other week, the gentleman came in and spoke on the investment portfolio that the city has. And he spoke of one big chunk of money, 22 million in T-bills, I believe it was, that had a 19-day short term. And I was wondering if the city budget receives any revenue from that, the return on the investment in the portfolio. Did I miss that, or did that?
You did not, but that was not one of the line items that was covered in today's agenda. So it will roll into the more comprehensive budget as we go forward.
Oh. It's not as revenue?
I'm sorry?
The
Not
investment
on-
income we receive wouldn't be
No.
listed
not-
as revenue? to
Not
the
in our
city?
accounting form. It doesn't count as it's a different type, it's an investment revenue. It's not, from an accounting standpoint, it's considered a different category of revenue. But it will absolutely be highlighted. I can't tell you which date that's going to come back,
I don't have it
but
with me, Mayor.
we'll get back to you. So it'll be applicable and you will be aware of it.
But it will be included in the overall
Absolutely.
city budget?
Of course.
Whatever
Yeah,
revenue we
and remember,
receive.
these reviews and this process is broken up into meeting size components, okay?
It's understandable.
Very good,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Just curious, with this Steve Carr, would we be able to look at this tool and be able to see what it costs for software expenditures and which software products have a yearly cost to them as far as maintenance and everything?
That's a good question. I know the line item includes that. I can't tell you, so the detail supporting the line item in the IT budget would identify that, although that may be a specific request. Is that something that's currently available through the dashboard?
I can tell you the biggest one, I bet it is probably ArcGIS. Is that, I'll get a nod from Doug back there, maybe? One of the biggest subscription costs is ArcGIS. Kind of up there is probably 2 or 3 of them, but They're subscription models, mostly for like the
But
maps and things.
where could somebody look at the actual software package increase forecasts?
Our budget worksheets are on our city website as well, Mayor.
So the answer would be the detail are there. If you can't find what you're looking for, go to city manager or go to communications, they'll help you identify it.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no other commenters, I will close public comment and we move to our second presentation by the Strategic Action Plan Workshop by a very well-known facilitator, Dr. Joe Saviak. So without further ado, I would ask you to come show us what you got.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, Council.
Morning.
Let's jump right in. Before you become concerned that, oh my goodness, we're going to be here, all afternoon with the lengthy PowerPoint. The good news is there's really 10 slides that should be drawing your attention. I mean, of course, you're free to focus on the slides that you feel are important, but 14 through 15, 20 through 21, 27, 30, 33, 36, 39, and 45. And so those are the ones I'll kind of park on and I'll spend a little more time on, and others I'll move through a little more quickly if you don't mind. I want to be respectful of your time and keep this as positive, productive, and efficient as possible. Then we've got to move to objective selection for you as a council. So here's the agenda for today. Once again, the focus is selecting objectives. You already, as a city, have selected your mission, vision, values, and 4 pillars of priorities. And so today we move to objectives. And of course, objectives, if you remember, I know you remember from the orientation, are specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. We'll improve customer service satisfaction by 10% in 12 months, right? And then we're going to, after you select the objectives as elected policymakers, we'll move to working with the staff on the specific implementation plans for each of those selected objectives, right?
So,
Yes, sir.
if I may ask, that last statement you made, is that where the metric comes into play? In other words, is that where we move from visionary statements to a measurable or a metric that we can then quantify throughout the budget season?
Absolutely. I mean, first I would commend the city for making use of key performance indicators, and obviously I've done extensive research on everything that you do and how you do it. And consistent with that, what you want to see happen and that culture of measurement, the objectives will have specific metrics to them. And so you'll know, did I get the football in the end zone, right? So great question. So real quick, this is just a brief recap of what we did during the orientation, very brief. Why do we do strategic planning? Successful organizations undertake strategic planning because it helps us identify threats and mitigate or prevent them. It helps us recognize opportunities and optimize them. It helps us align our operations with our objectives, right? So the organization operations match the objectives we're trying to achieve. It literally helps us design the future, create the future, lead successful change, right? The real beneficiaries are citizens because government operates more effectively, efficiently, with greater productivity and achieves objectives that are important to them, right? So strategic planning, think of these verbs as meaning being important. It clarifies, what we're doing. It optimizes our performance. It also allocates efficiently our limited resources. When employees have a specific, mission and goals and objectives, that tends to inspire, right? And everyone's on the same sheet of music and working to achieve the same objectives. It also helps us attract resources, right? It's kind of like going to the bank with a business plan, right? You're able to better leverage different funding sources by having a winning plan. It, of course, enhances public confidence. The public likes to see, hey, exactly what you just said, Mr. Mayor. You've got a specific plan. You've got it specific objectives. I know what the metrics are, and this is going to bring good things for our city. It also helps us lead change successfully. So just briefly on the research process, this is a research-driven process. It's multi-stage, it's multi-source, it's sequenced for a purpose. And I'll briefly highlight all the different research resources that we reviewed, as well as research tools of data collection analysis that we utilized. We obviously did extensive research on the organization and the community. We conducted interviews with the mayor and council and executive team. There was an electronic survey completed by all city employees. Obviously, that was inclusive of the council too. And you're looking for what? Major recurring themes, and we'll get to those today. Of course, during a workshop, you're free to either reinforce what the data is telling us in the way of recurring themes or introduce something new, right? But it's a really good mix of, I don't want to go too far as a former professor of research methods. I see the graduate students in the room smiling. I don't want to go too far into this, but it's a really good mix of quantitative numerical data and then qualitative, right? Observational interview type data. And you get the strength of both types of data collection tools. So, and here's just a brief snapshot of all the different reports and data sources and statistics and information that we reviewed in preparing for the strategic action plan process. So then we conducted interviews with all of you in February, and there were 6 specific questions, right? A SWOT analysis of the city and city government within the 4 pillars, right? Environment, infrastructure, safe and reliable services, civic engagement.
Strong, resilient economy.
Strong, resilient economy. You identified, programs, capital projects, or ways that you might enhance the capacity of the organization to always effectively execute. Then obviously you could have a number of different priorities gathered from under each pillar. So it's always helpful to ask, the summary type question or the prioritization type question, like, well, how about across all 4 pillars, what were your top 3 priorities? And you'll see that on slide 14, we'll talk about that. As well as what do you want to see happen during the workshop? Excellent participation from both the elected and the administrative leadership. Yeah, so real quick, the strength, every city, every organization has strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Of course, a weakness can be an opportunity, right? But all organizations that want to continue to succeed going into the future, they undertake this kind of analysis, and this was a question asked during the interviews. And you see which ones were identified. So then we asked for each of the 4 pillars, really think of like 3 kind of categories. Okay, well, what capital improvement projects would aid the strong, resilient economy? What programs, policies, or services would be conducive to the strong economy? What in the way of institutional capacity or internal support operations would be helpful to the strong, resilient economy? And so those are all responses we received for each of those 3 categories within each of the 4 pillars, right? So then when we get to slide 14, if any member of the city council said it, it's here, right? And so normally in qualitative analysis, you're looking for frequency, like was it a recurring theme? Did 5 people say it out of the, right? But we thought it was important to, list out all 14, responses from the city council on when it came to the question of, well, what are the 3, if you had to pick 3 priorities across 4 pillars, what would they be, right? And then we also
Dr. Sabeck, may I just stop you? I just want to clarify, because I was a little confused on this specifics, the last one, when I was going through this. So when you say 3 priorities across all 4 pillars, you said that every single response from every council member is listed on here. So we're not identifying that these are priorities that each one of us set against the 4 or across the 4, but this is, if it came out of our mouths as a response to this question, it's listed.
Yes, exactly, Councilmember
Perfect.
Pagliari,
Okay.
exactly.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And I think it's helpful to do that because you're talking about an N or a population of 5, as opposed to like a survey involving, 250 or something. As well as it's good for elected leadership to, go, well, hey, I remember saying during the interview this, is it there? Yeah, it's here.
And it's
right?
not in any order of prevalence, priority, anything like that?
No, you
Okay.
can think of this as
Looks
kind of like
chronological. I know I was first, and I think mine are up top, so I think it probably goes chronologically, right?
Yeah, probably, but I don't want to, you can de-identify the data, you know what I mean? Yes, Council Member Pontieri, think of this as almost like a court transcript, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Just took it down, transcribed it, and provided it, right?
Thank
You'll see later as we develop the data and look at the survey research, and analyze both the interview and the survey research data, then you begin to see, consistent recurring themes. So this is what, these were the expectations of the City Council for the workshop. And of course, once again, they're all listed. If a City Council member said it once, it's here, right? And then I would point out there was a high degree of agreement or alignment between the executive team and the City Council. In other words, you all seem to be on the same sheet of music during these interview questions. And so you see the SWOT analysis by your executive team. And then you see when we asked, well, what capital projects, what programs or services, or how would enhancing institutional capacity aid in success on that pillar? You see the specific recurring themes from those interviews. And then you see their 3 priorities across all 4 pillars. Obviously, there were 17 interviews, so there were 13 staff, and there's not 13 bullets there, so, we picked the ones that were recurring, right? Whereas with council, if any member of council said it once, it was on that, it's on that slide. And then the expectations of your administrative leadership for what they'd like to see happen during the workshop. And like I said, the more we move through this, the more you'll see clarity and consensus, So we also like to do, like I said, multiple methods of data collection analysis are best for reaching strong and empirically validated conclusions, right? In other words, if I employed multiple methods and they all kind of pointed me in the same path, that's probably a good way to go from a research standpoint. So we needed an N of 227. We got an N of 257 in order to achieve a 95% level of confidence. It's a 5% margin of error. So it's a statistically representative sample that enables us to feel confident in analyzing the data. There were 9 questions. On the interview there were 4, but there were 9 here. And they were closed-ended. And where did the topics come from? The interviews. In other words, everything's sequenced. What emerged as recurring themes in the interviews became the basis for the survey research questions, right? And then, of course, what also probably helps you as decision makers is knowing, okay, what are the priorities and what's the level of agreement, right? So order of importance and level of agreement, right? How strongly did people feel about that? So when you take all the interview themes across 4 pillars and you group them, here are your big 5, In other words, if you keep seeing technology pop up, right, across different interviews, right? We probably should be asking about that in the survey then, right? Because that was a recurring theme. And so those 5 form the basis of the survey research questions. Once again, based upon, these were the recurring interview themes, right? But, we drill into it, you know what I mean? We ask, okay, great. When we're talking Parks and Recreation, can you prioritize for us? What projects in Parks and Recreation you mean, right? Same thing with technology, as well as then we ask some level of agreement questions in addition to prioritization. So regarding technology, right? Everyone was asked to rank these because by frequency they came up as the key technology projects. I want to make it very, very clear on the record. Data center is already being done. You've already funded it. It's already being implemented. So you can say, I won on that one, and we can move on to the other technology projects, right? So there's a graphical visual representation of the data. But you know, what you're trying to get to is you're trying to get to like that ranking and go, well, if we had to do one technology project, and I'm not suggesting that, you know, multiple technology projects can all be important to you and, you know, can become objectives within the strategic action plan. You know, here though, you see actually, okay, you know, the furthest column by score, you know, which came out on top is the priority, right? Through the survey research. And once again, you know, Parks and Recreation were a key theme in the interviews. They became a question in the survey research. And then, of course, the specific Parks and Recreation services or projects that were recurring themes in the interviews, that's what we began asking about in the survey research. And of course, once again, we're asking to rank, you know, prioritize. And here's a visual representation of the data, you know. I'm not sure I would read a huge amount into the graphical representation of the data, by the way, because as you notice, once you get to the score column, there's not great divergence between the numbers in terms of the ranking, if that makes sense. It's not like one came in out of 5 and the others were just 1s, right? So I'd point that out too. And then external communications was a key theme in the interviews, so it became a question for the survey research, right? As well as, okay, well, what do you mean by that, and what would you identify as important within external communications, and what specific tools, right? And so you see a visual representation of the data. And then here you get to a quantification or numerical ranking, right? Where you see, you know, 3.48 coming out on top in the final column. And then, of course, it's important for organizations to have the capacity to effectively execute what the objectives that are selected, right? And so that can encompass a number of different issues, and these were brought out during the interviews, so they were asked about in the survey. Once again, visual representation of the data in terms of prioritization. And then I would turn your attention to, on slide 36, that final column, the score, right, which actually gives you, you know, ranking for objectives for internal operations, or like I like to call it, institutional capacity.
Those scores were separated a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, you can. It will vary by issue. It will vary by issue, you know. Once again, though, doesn't mean that you're bound by this data to, you can say, hey, that still is a key objective, and I want to see it happen. And if that's the consensus of the council, that's going to happen, right? But I'd rather make decisions with the data than without it.
Amen.
You know?
I second that, yeah.
It helps you better explain and articulate things to the public when they ask, well, why did that become a priority, right? And by that, I would add, too, not only were we capturing any citizen comment today, but, of course, the city was conducted a citywide citizen survey at the exact same time, right? And so we'll be capitalizing on that data, too, and supplementing the data that we've already collected with the results and findings of the citizen survey. So you have data from the elected leadership, data from the administrative leadership, data from all city employees, and then data from all citizens of Palm Coast, right? So then another one of the big five, if you will, were infrastructure and operations. Once you grouped recurring themes, and probably no surprise to any of you as to which issues fell underneath that umbrella, if you will. And then a visual representation as to what are the priorities there, right? And then let's switch it to the numerical. And to your point, Councilman Clufus, there you see it's a little more, little less spread and a little more tightly clustered, right? Yep. So then on questions 6 through 9, the first three questions were about ranking or prioritization. Then we said, well, let's also test it by asking level of agreement with statements. Once again, the more sources of evidence point you to the same conclusion, the stronger you are in asserting that conclusion. So, questions 6 through 9 were level of agreement on this series of statements, right? And, not surprisingly, and this would, on some of these capital projects, be true of really any city in the state of Florida. Not surprisingly, people recognize, if you want to do capital projects, you probably have to provide resources, right? So that was not exactly, big breaking news, So let me sum it up here. This is a key slide for you to pay attention to. If you had to go to the number one, right, in technology, it was, the software upgrades. Once again, not saying the other issues that you shared or discussed were not important, and you're free to select other technology issues, but, what did the data tell us, right?
Is there a ranking and hierarchy here, or are these just the bullets in some random order?
What was number one under each of the big five?
But they're not in order of, like, technology came in, ranked first, Parks and Rec second. So those main bullet points are not in order of priority, right?
No.
Got it.
No, I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the questions. I always say the data does not automatically speak for itself, and it requires some interpretation and judgment, discussion, analysis, and so this is very positive. Externally, the number one pick was, hey, making sure we're educating the public on the city budget, which I think you all were just doing that this morning. In other words, you were drawing attention to, your tools of transparency and ways that you engage and inform citizens about city finances. The internal operations, what came in number one, staffing and training, recruitment and retention. I mean, once again, this would not significantly diverge, I feel confident in saying, to many other municipalities around the state of Florida. If we were at the League of Cities right now, there probably wouldn't be people saying, oh no, recruitment and retention, that's not an issue at all for us, you know what I mean? So, and then when it came to the group of infrastructure and operations, water and wastewater capacity to meet future demands. Yeah, and this was my point earlier. I said, no surprise here that everyone who took the survey recognizes, hey, if you're going to do certain capital projects, you've got to ensure that you have the funding for it. You also have the benefit that 86% of your employees are residents of the city, so they not only work and serve, but they live and experience it, right? And I would, add in too, the city council members were obviously part of the survey too. So I know I said let's take a break here, but it's a really brief break. Like, okay, now it's over. So, because I know that you all are, hey, let's get down to business. So,
if I may, just
yes,
as part of the, I won't extend the break, but, so you've mentioned different data inputs. So you had city council, which is a group of five.
Right.
You mentioned city staff. I don't know how many folks are involved with that. You mentioned city executive staff as well.
Right, so we had the administrative leadership,
Yep.
and then we had,
But my question is this, so you've
Yep.
got different information coming from these different sources.
right,
Does your study take into account any differences between those populations? So for example, when we look at the city, there are demographic qualities which profile or define the city.
right.
When you look at city staff, it may be somewhat different, and city council,
Right.
again, different. Does that play into this at all, or not? Everybody's
and-
response
and-
is everybody's response.
And that's why I'm looking forward to looking at your citizen survey, to
Okay.
see what the degree of alignment is with the citizen survey with city employees, administrative leadership, and elected leadership. I never want to run ahead of the data. I suspect it's not going to vary significantly from what, we've heard from the team here, But that is a really good question, and that's why it worked out very well that you were conducting that citizen survey at the same time. So I'll have a chance to take a look at that exactly and go, how does that square up with what everybody else told us, right? So here's the part where, the next steps are obviously, select objectives. That's what today is all about. Then Dr. Levy and I will work with the staff in terms of, developing summary implementation plans, like a one-pager that just says, here's how that will be done, right? Strategies, tactics, personnel, resources, timeline, and metrics, right? How that will be measured, how will we know if we got the football in the end zone. Then, of course, we'll be taking a look at that citizen survey and pulling out any valuable information from that too. So really where we're at now is you're on. And so I'm going to be asking you to identify objectives. There is no magic number. I would say for a strategic action plan, I wouldn't try to do 50 or 100. When we try to be everything to everyone, and there's always another SAP, correct? But there might be 10, there might be 12, there might be 15, I don't want to limit you in any way. And when consensus is achieved, in other words, is a member of the council says, I think this should be an objective, I'll ask, okay, great. And do we have consensus on that? And when we have consensus on that, it goes on the pad, right? And then when it goes on the pad, I walk out of here with it, and that gets, put together in a document. And once again, every single one of these stages is key to producing the final strategic action plan.
So will you offer up the objectives that we have initially identified? And obviously, if they're duplicated by more than one city council member, it won't be included more than once on this list that we're going to go through.
Well, I could. I just, when you're a researcher, you never want to bias the room,
Right.
So,
But I'm a bit confused on that, because
Yeah.
we did meet and we did offer up our objectives, so I think those should be the first thing on the table.
okay. That's totally your call. I wanted to open it up and let you decide
I thought we did.
how to best proceed.
When we all met individually, I think we all
Well,
offered
I think that's
up our-
reflected on slide 14, if we
Right.
want to use that as a base.
Yeah, that's a
Right.
good place to start.
Right.
And then, was that a volunteer to go first because you think that you were chronologically selected up front?
Mayor, may I just make a
Yes.
general comment? Sorry. Based on the overall presentation and based on kind of what we're tasked with at this point. So we as city council sit up here and we drive the policy, and then city manager takes that policy and directs staff accordingly. So at one point, there was, a comment, well, only city manager works at our pleasure. But technically, all of the staff kind of puts our policy that we're going to implement, that we're going to state is what we want them to implement. They're all kind of putting that into play.
Right.
I think the value in the interviews with staff that you did is what they're encountering when they go to implement, right? So we can sit up here all day long and say, well, we want this utopia where we want better roads and better swell maintenance and more potable water. but at the end of the day, it takes money to do all those things. So we have to find efficiencies, we have to find diversification, we have to figure out how it is that we're going to give staff the tools for that successful implementation. So I'd ask from my colleagues up here to keep that in mind as we're driving this policy, to not just, glaze over what we heard from staff, because I think it's important when they go to implement how they realistically feel they're going to be able to put into play what we decide is the policy. So just as a general comment, keep that in mind. I think it's really important as we move forward.
And Dr. Saviak had certainly reassured me anyway, I don't know who else asked the question, that comes as a part of the, that comes as a later step in this
Yes, sir.
process to be able to realistically assign not just the metrics, but the funding and the hurdles. I think that's a good point. There are hurdles that we may not encounter every day that staff would, that would prevent this utopian vision from being
Right.
executed well. So
But
good
I
point.
think you make a very good point, waiting for our citizens survey to see what our citizens want too.
Sure.
Because we have to balance all of this.
Yeah, that's a great piece of data.
And that may be, I don't know if we should hold off until we get that survey for you to proceed. with
Well, I
this.
think what.
Because I think you make a great point about that. And
So I think I may have a solution for you, Mr. Vice Mayor, and that is, you can go ahead and identify objectives today. If, when that survey comes back, if there's something you want to modify,
okay,
plan is coming back before you. And so there's your opportunity to go, you know what, now considering the citizen survey results, I'd like to alter that objective this way, or I'd like to add this objective. And so all of this is coming back before you. In other words, we're not, this isn't final, it's an evolving product, and certainly I concur with you that if there was something that that you all feel is important emerging from that citizen survey that should be incorporated when this plan, strategic action plan comes back before you.
And my understanding, your other theme is, how many objectives did you note during the interviews? You said it's 18 or something like that, is that correct?
There were 14 from council
So-
on that slide I've got up here. There's not a magic, there were.
No, but is there a goal to reduce that to a more digestible number?
I think organizations.
I'm trying to piggyback on your question.
It's an excellent question. All organizations have to make that judgment about their current capacity and, and what they've already undertaken and committed to. And once again, I always say to cities and counties and other government entities, if you don't get it this plan, you can get it next plan,
Well, you bring up a really good point, because something that I don't think you highlighted yet, I'm sure you will, is that you're also rolling forward with strategic action priorities that we are inheriting from prior strategic action plan initiatives.
Correct, and we reviewed those very closely too. And if those want to inform your decisions here today, by all means,
Yeah, I think not for nothing. We have gotten presentations on where the public is on a lot of things so far. So we did get presentations on comp plan surveys, on the Parks and Master Plan. So we have heard from the public as far as, that data is concerned. I know we don't have it in front of us here today, but I think that there's pretty similar recurring themes that have come out of those surveys as well, that all of us up here, listening and paying attention should keep in mind, obviously, as we're going through this.
That's an excellent point. This city has multiple tools of gathering and seeking citizen input and engagement, and making sure that you're informed in real time on key policy issues or program or capital project issues.
So I for one, if I can get consensus, I certainly am interested in Dr. Saviak rolling through the non-magical number of 14 or 18, whatever it is.
Fine.
Right.
Is everybody okay with that as a starting point?
It could even be less,
Well,
10,
No, I'm not, whatever the number is. So if you could help us based on your initial interview, just, again, the
Right.
list is not in any particular order,
Right.
but let's just get them out there.
Well, let me go, do you want me to start with this slide, which was your interviews?
Yes.
But then there was also another slide where there was like a number one within technology. You know, the ones I showed you
The
where it
staff
was
ones.
graphically and numerically ranked.
I think we start with council, and so
Okay.
that is something that I kind of want to mention though, too, because I think that ultimately, what I would love to see is that we're able to use what we felt were our priorities up here to also push what staff finds to be important for the organization of,
Look for the, yeah.
Right.
look for those common themes, and being able to kill two birds with one stone, so to speak.
Start with what we did, what we know. That's a easy
Right,
starting.
right. And you can
starting
always go
block.
to, slide 21,
Yeah.
major themes from the executive team
Okay.
on interviews. Okay, so who'd like to kick us off with objective one?
Full millage rate rollback.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, in terms of discussion, then once you have discussed and reached a consensus on
Let's compose the list first.
Okay.
I mean, taking them one at a time out of context, I feel better about putting down a list to work from, unless you feel you want,
Yeah, I
That's fine.
Up
can
to
go
you.
Two different drives to the same destination. Either I could go, wait till you go, we have consensus, it's this, now put that on the pad, or I could put it on the pad and you could go, let's
all right, so
discuss it.
we're going around. So
Either way-
go ahead,
either way-
hit
either way
it.
you wanna go.
I think our solar evaluation of city assets is a tremendous opportunity for future funding mechanisms. I think right now we're starting to approach the equilibrium point to where if we invest in our solar capacity in the city, we may be able to have a near enough time horizon for return on investment that we may be able to yield additional funds for programs such as funding an arts district, which obviously is going to require capital and things like this. I'm a major proponent of our solar evaluation because it potentially offers us more monies in the future, and the technology and the break-even point on a investment horizon is starting to become, 7-8 years. So.
I'm very concerned about the economic development, jobs and employment.
Hold on, I'm sorry, Mayor, are we going through each one individually?
This is,
I'm-
no, ask your question
I'm
again.
just confused,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
Well, there was one issue already raised by the vice mayor. So do you want to, I probably would recommend issue by issue. In other words,
Yeah.
someone, on council says, I think this should be an objective for the strategic action plan. Then either I can put it on the pad and you discuss it, or you discuss it and I can put it on the pad, but probably go one by one, I think.
Well, so I would also encourage our council, I think there are some things, finding capital is going to be difficult in the future. It always is. I mean, nobody wants to contribute more capital, but the truth of the matter is a lot of these things are going to require capital. That's why I believe the solar evaluation could yield additional capital in the future. If there's other items on this list, obviously like economic development could potentially reap returns from taxes, et cetera. But that is why I felt passionately about our solar evaluation, because it may be able to provide at least a minuscule amount of funding for some of our other priorities that we're looking to accomplish across these themes.
So are you commenting according to the vice mayor's first item in terms of a tool?
Yep, and I think that
Okay.
a full rollback is, in response to that, I think we may be able to spend a little bit of money now to potentially reap more capital into the future. So I think they kind of go hand in hand. I would take the vice mayor's position as we definitely don't want to be spending money frivolously, but if we have an opportunity to invest in some evaluations that could yield additional monies in the future, then those would probably be prudent steps for the city to take.
I don't mind going next unless somebody else has a need to go next. So, and I'll tie it to you since you kicked it off. So with regard to capital improvement projects, specifically talking about road improvement, neighborhood safety, the canal and seawall conditions, city park management conditions, I think roads, public, yeah, so I've got all that. So I would need to be assured that the budget covered the costs that city council was willing to invest to get those programs caught up before I could agree with a rollback. In other words, I would need to make sure that we carve those out and well-funded those infrastructure projects in
I
advance
was
of a decision.
confused when you said seawalls. That's private property. That's not the city's.
Well, okay.
responsibility if you have a house
So I'll call it the Canal Initiative.
We're talking about dredging.
Well, the Canal Initiative. Now,
Yes.
there are a lot of different inputs.
But I
So
just want
for
to make
ex-
sure what people understand. These
Yeah.
seawalls are owned by
Yes, of course,
individuals.
of
We're not
course.
going to
But
repair
the-
somebody's seawall.
Correct,
and,
but
you know.
the material that flows into the canal, that's its origin point. It's breaking through or coming from there. So, yeah, I don't
Right,
wanna
right, I
get
just
in-
want to make sure that.
So let me
that-
call it
I
the
got a little-
Canal Initiative.
That would be fine,
Okay.
yes. Okay.
But again, so I'm starting with infrastructure
Okay.
in response to the mayor's comment. I don't have an issue with it. However, without having seen the numbers yet, it's hard for me to be assured that we are providing sufficient funding for our current infrastructure needs. And that would be a requirement of
And
mine.
it's entirely possible, and this is completely up to the discretion of policymakers, that you can consider in different policies, programs, services, and capital projects outside of the strategic action plan.
Yeah.
In other words, there are some things you may go, I want that in the strategic action plan. There are things you may go, I want to do that, but I want to do it outside the strategic action plan, you know?
And I think it's important to understand, at least in the past, we've had this plan. It's sort of a wish list of what we all want, but at the end of the day, we don't always accomplish everything on that
No, it's what
list.
there are must-haves and there are wants.
Right,
You've
So I
said that
just,
before.
it's sort of, just want to make sure we stay focused on that. You know, Nick may want something, you may want something, I may want something, we put it down on that list. And at the end of this whole budget process, it's like, well, here's what we can get to this year. This we may have to push back until next year. Some things are more long-term, like a dredging or canal plan. That's a long-term endeavor, where something is full millage rate rollback for 1 year is an immediate item we can address
And
and
we-
do or not do.
We may be inheriting things that are ongoing that we still prioritize that come from a prior strategic
Right,
action
exactly,
plan.
exactly. We do have those also. And there were things that have dropped off the strategic action plan because they were just no longer a necessity or anything that we should be involved in.
point.
And we've seen things just drop.
I wish that list was longer.
Huh?
I wish that list was longer. Councilwoman Pontieri, comment?
Yeah, so I'm going to be I'm going to go a little more out on the ledge on this one, I think, and say we can't afford a rollback, not a full rollback. Not if we're looking at the infrastructure needs of our city. When I look at, or when I listen to residents come before us and stand at that podium and for 3 minutes tell me about what they need and want in their city, it's not $30 in savings on their property tax bill. It is, I want you to fix roads. I want my swale to not be flooded. I want, when I put a case into Palm Coast Connect, I want to not wait 2 and 3 weeks for someone to come out. I don't want to wait 2 years to have my swale in front of my house vac-conned. I think we were able to grant a full rollback last year. I was in favor of it. I'm glad we did it because it came at a time when everything is rising around us financially. So I think that was something that we were able to provide our residents that at the time was absolutely necessary. What I'm seeing in this list of council priorities is a lot of it's infrastructure based. And when I look at the comments from staff, the main theme that seems to be pretty recurring and strong is we don't have enough money to fund the swale maintenance that we need to fund. We don't have enough money to fund potable water, wastewater. We don't have enough money to fund road pavement. So I'm not opposed to figuring out how we get to full rollback. What I am opposed to is saying, well, I want a full rollback and not coming up with a solution as to how we get there without also addressing these other infrastructure needs. So if there is some type of cost savings somewhere or some other diversification, Vice Mayor, that you're in favor of that can get us there, then by all means, please come to council the next time that we have this type of, the next time that SAP is before us or the next time the budget's before us with this resolution, because I'm happy to explore that and look into it. But as I look at this right now, I look at our infrastructure needs and it is, to me, very real issue that we have, and we cannot afford a rollback as we sit here right now.
Well, I would totally disagree with that, because the same reason you voted for a rollback last year, those situations still exist. All you have to do is go put some gasoline in your car, go shopping at Publix or Walmart. Everything has still gone through the roof, thanks to Bidenomics. And our citizens are feeling that pinch, especially our elderly citizens, especially those people that are widowed and have lost half their Social Security. I'm out knocking on doors every day as I run my campaign, and I'm talking to voters every single day. And I got to tell you, that is the first thing they want to talk about, the cost of everything. And why can't we tighten our belts and do another full millage rate rollback? Because that small amount of money does add up, at least in their pocketbooks, especially for our senior citizens. So the conditions have not changed, and what I think our responsibility is finding where we can make those cuts. You mentioned swales, and yeah, that's a complaint that we get an awful lot. And maybe we need to be looking at contracting some of that work out to the private part of private companies who actually are maybe be a little bit better at managing those types of money than we are. I think our job is to first set the goal of not squeezing our taxpayers, and then find where we can make those cuts to do the work that we need to do, the must-haves, the roads, things of that nature, police, fire, so on and so forth. I think first we set the budget goal, and then we find where we can make the cuts.
Well, so you mentioned police and fire,
Yeah.
and I absolutely agree with you. I think that police
That's
and
a
fire,
must-have,
it's a
right?
must-have, right?
Yeah.
The sheriff's office needs 9 new deputies. Those are not free,
No, they're not.
and they come out of our general fund.
Absolutely.
So then my question to you is, Vice Mayor, how do we get that money elsewhere?
Well, we don't do it by doing a sales tax increase. That to me, and make sure you understand this, because you're the one who's been saying that sales tax will affect the visitors that come to our community. Yes, it will.
They
But
will
it's
pay a
going
lot
to
of it.
affect 100% of us who live in this community.
As does 9 additional deputies. They keep us safe. So here's
They do.
my challenge to you, Vice Mayor, is because last year when we went through this process, we had a conversation about how we would cut, how we would fund different things. I scoured the budget sheets and found $1 million so that we could do microsurfacing on 28 roads. That took hours and hours and hours of time. I am challenging you, Vice Mayor, because if you can find a way to get us there, then I'm all about it. I want to get us there too. But it's very easy to sit up here and say, let's get to full rollback. Let's not raise rates. Let's not implement a sales tax. But you know what? Hoorah for law enforcement. That's not enough.
Okay, so does that represent, so Dr. Saviak is trying to
Yes.
get us to a priority, so.
Specific
identif-
objectives.
Okay,
Yeah.
the specific objective might be to identify those cuts in this year's fiscal budget that would help us get closer to what the Vice Mayor had suggested as an objective, and we'll flush out where those cuts would have to come from in order to get there.
Yeah, and I
Or-
think.
Can you
that,
verbalize that for us as a, I think everybody up here in those kind of words agrees with that, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think, I mean, I appreciate what you did, looking at the roads, looking for a place where we could save money, and I think that's something we all need to do during this process. You spent a lot of time looking for something, and I think we all need to do that, because there are things out there. But I think, though, when you set your budget at home, you don't go through and just decide, I want to spend this, and I want to spend this, and I want to spend this, and then come back and try to figure out if you have the money or not. The first thing you do is you look at the money you have, and then you have to budget accordingly. And that's something we need to do too. And if we can find those, I think if we're motivated to find those cuts by setting that limit with a full millage rate rollback, I think we'll be a little more successful if we try to find cuts first with no goal in sight. So to me, it's a goal-setting process.
Well, I mean, the other side of the coin is if we're discussing the components, which I believe would be is the list you're looking for, those components are going to add up to a certain amount. And that's going to identify how close or how far away you are from being able to achieve some relief in terms of taxes. But you have to approach it from both sides. You can't, if you start just on one side and you arbitrarily choose a budget finish line, you may not properly prioritize the issues that the public has brought forward. So, I mean, I think everybody up here would like to go where you're,
And again-
in the direction you're going in,
Right.
but it's not an arbitrary number.
As
We have to
said-
build up to that number.
As we said earlier.
Yeah.
The whole point of this is
Yeah.
to set the goals. We don't always accomplish those goals
Right.
in this plan.
Right.
But the point is to set the goals. And if we can accomplish them, we do accomplish
Mm-hmm.
them. So the whole point here is not to decide today whether we
Right.
have a full millage rate
Yeah, and-
rollback. But it's to set a goal,
Yeah.
just like Mr. Kloufus's,
Right.
thoughts
But
on
you-
solar. That's a goal.
But so the goal that you're suggesting is a lofty goal. It's at this level. I think at the same time, we have to look at goals within the components that actually create the build-up and add up to the budget.
The goal I'm suggesting is that we work towards a full millage rate rollback.
No, I heard you that. So work towards that.
That's a goal.
And I think everybody up
Yeah.
here would work towards that, but we have to look at the component costs to make sure that each of our
And that
priorities
we'll do
are
as we
well
go through this
represented.
budget too,
Okay.
right? Yes, we're going to set goals.
I haven't asked
Yeah.
Councilwoman Hyder yet to weigh in, I'm sorry.
I'm in agreement with that. It sounds good that we should try to find a way to cut back on other expenses so that we can do the rollback, but I'm sure that it's going to be a challenge getting there.
No one said it
So,
would be easy.
With the objective
Dr.
being,
Saviak, do you have a way to
ident-
include-
Identify cost savings and
Okay.
conduct
Oh,
analysis
and I would
to.
mirror that with alternative revenue sources. Both get you to the same place.
i.e. savings, conduct analysis, and penmanship is not something I got.
So I'm still confused with what you're doing on this board, because I thought we were going through and individually coming out with those goals that we all want to happen. Is that what we're doing, or are we?
Absolutely. I'm writing.
And I think Mr. Kloufus was a little confused too, because we went from my thing to his thing. So I'm not sure we're all on the same page here, Joe.
Okay, yeah, I'm writing things down to document that, hey, the council said this is an objective.
Okay.
Now, I apologize for the redundancy.
Yeah, I just want to make,
But that way, it's, guaranteed, hey, the consensus of the council was, that should be an objective within the strategic action plan. And that's,
All right,
that's
so-
all I'm doing is being like a courtroom stenographer, I'm writing down. Now, it may be redundant because you already said it before.
no, I just want to, like,
I think what he's doing, Vice Mayor, is he's figuring out a way to get you what you want, which is identifying the savings and conducting the analysis for
Okay.
diversification.
I thought we were going to start by listing out the goals and then going through how we got there. So that's why I was a little
Well,
turned
actually,
around.
I think best use of your time is, and certainly you're free to choose what time you want to spend on what activities. Today, just articulate the goals or the objectives, and then let us work with your staff on specific
Okay.
plans to get.
So you're going to do a goal, and then you're going to try to do a breakdown on how we get there, and then a
Exactly.
goal and how we break. That's where I got confused.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it's a
that way-
process.
That way, I'm not
So-
pulling you too deep in the weeds of implementation on every single objective.
Yeah.
Councilwoman,
In this setting.
did you get a chance to kind of verbalize your high-level goal?
For this specific initiative? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think identifying where we can save money and conducting the analysis for other revenue sources is necessary to get us to a rollback. I mean, we have to. We can't just cut again and call it a day. There's got to be a way to get there.
Well, did we not last year dip a little bit into our strategic reserves to get there too?
Correct.
Yeah, so that is a possibility
Well,
again.
that would come as a way to get
Right,
there. So
yeah.
let's just get that.
For posterity.
Councilman
Sure.
Kloufus, you want to restate your
Yep.
kind of objective so it fits
Absolutely. And
the
just for
plan here?
posterity, I don't think we dipped into the reserves. I think we diverted funding from the Maintenance Operations Center.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
potato,
All right.
potato, as I say, right? Yeah, and I think that our,
Potato.
I know, and I say tomato too, it's kind of the same thing. I think that our goals are synergistic in nature where it's going to be increasingly more difficult to find more and more places to cut. And I think that goes to Councilwoman Pontieri's point is that the deeper that we need to make these cuts, the more and more we will probably feel this, not only at a citizen level, but also at an employee level. And I think initiatives for identifying alternative means of revenue totally fills in a gap here with the solar evaluation of city assets. I think having just, new ideas that are trying to limit spending, but potentially could offer us additional funding that we can earmark into the future. I think that's why not only is Vice Mayor Danko's point well heard, but I think the initiative of the solar evaluation kind of works in tandem with that, where if we can find ways to try to offset some of the fixed costs of operating our city, we may be able to accomplish both. But I, like Councilwoman Pontieri, understand that when we have individuals who come to our council, the sentiment has been quite unanimous that we need to improve our street pavement program. We need to increase swale maintenance. People are looking for more boots on the ground, if you will, than instead of having necessarily a reduction in their ad valorem taxes. But I think this is a great conversation that we're having so that we can be realistic with the expectations from the output of our strategic action plan and to see what we can really accomplish.
So Nick, what you're talking about is an actual item for our strategic action plan.
Yes, sir.
So it's a separate item.
Yep.
Right.
And it's a long-term sort of approach that will not just help us today, but hopefully really help us down the road.
So
Correct.
you
It's
would
great.
say
I'm in favor of that.
Conduct solar evaluation of city assets. And there's consensus for this.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And it accomplishes long-term sustainability. It accomplishes a lot of goals.
So the question would become later on, how much will that cost us to do?
And when? What's the phasing
And
of
when,
it? Sure,
yeah.
of course. Councilwoman Hyder, did you want to?
I think that all the comments have made sense, and it is possibly a doable thing for this council. However, I feel very confident that we need to find ways to cut back on some of the other budget items and possibly be able to do the rollback.
I find it, it's incumbent upon us to be very realistic too with regards to what we're looking at in surrounding cities. We have the lowest tax rate of anybody around us, and we did that, to your point, Vice Mayor, last year, and I think we were still pretty low based on what we were last year. We went even lower. So again, I just want us to be very realistic as we go through this process. I think the ultimate goal that, as it's stated, is good. It allows us a way to try to get there. But I don't want to see us sacrifice what our city needs right now so that we can just say, we gave you another rollback.
So I have a question for you with regard to your process. How can I phrase this? Is there a fat-burning mechanism within the process that you're guiding us through? So we're talking again about cutting and identifying expenditures that we may want to pull out of the budget. Removing something from the budget is a way to get there. I don't know exactly how we're going to value what it costs the residents in terms of the either amenity or the service level that they expect. But that's a part of this process, and I'm going to call it fat burning. I like the idea we take responsibility for the rollback, despite criticism, which we all got, but we did it at a time when that was a serious belt tightening. So I just want to make sure that we build in this fat-burning concept now. So whatever we want to take out, we have to understand that it is more than likely going to either reduce a service level or remove an item, or perhaps push something else forward. And I want, Joe, I want you to make sure that you help us discuss that through the process.
Right, I think I would just maybe phrase it this way.
Sorry, I wasn't more fluent with that.
No, you made a lot of sense. Identify savings, conduct revenue and impact analysis to achieve rollback.
Yeah, I think that's the proper way to say it. I do like that because it does make it incumbent upon us up here to actually not just say the words, but do the work and figure out, okay, how are we going to prioritize the monies that we decide we're going to take in And what are we up here, because we're elected to make these decisions, and they're tough decisions. What are the tough decisions that we're going to make to get there?
Now, I had said in mine that I really, and I may not have identified all of the underlying parts of infrastructure, but I fully mean to have infrastructure on that list.
Okay.
Now, we can further define it in terms of its many different components, but that list would be incomplete without each of us, because I think we all understand that infrastructure is going to require a priority from us in terms of catch-up even, but getting to a service level that is acceptable to our residents. I mean, I don't think anybody disputes that.
No, and I think the quality of life is something that we all hold very close to us here in Palm Coast. That's why we choose to live here.
Yeah.
But the two things aren't necessarily conducive. The high quality of life and then limiting the amount that we can spend to maintain that high quality of life, juggling act. Yeah.
So that's the fat-burning concept again, but,
So how would you like to articulate an infrastructure objective?
well, Councilman Clufus, you know, he binds the two together, so your quality of life is completely dependent on the quality of your infrastructure, so I don't know if you want to join those two, or how everybody wants to say it.
So now we're moving on to a separate goal.
Well,
Is
I
that
said this
correct?
earlier, I just didn't want to lose it,
Oh,
yeah.
I think the last goal you actually mentioned, though, was a dredging plan.
Well, no, actually, what I said was, it was capital improvement, and that was one of the sub-items. So let me take that back.
I want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah, so I'm talking about, let me just broadly say it, infrastructure. And then there are many different line items below that.
Well, I would think that the dredging thing is a separate sort of part of our strategic action plan that's going to take time, obviously.
Would you agree that it's part of our infrastructure?
I think it's a separate item, because when I mean, you can define it any way you
Right,
want,
all
but
right.
to me, on the dredging side, that's really kind of long-term, because
Yeah.
we're looking at
For
doing
me, that's
more
no
studies,
different
we're
than,
looking at
than
doing
than the
grants,
road
we're-
resurfacing program into the future.
Yeah, but I think it's important the public knows that we are finally focused on this dredging issue.
So then my
That's
item
the
would
only
be
reason I
to
would-
identify infrastructure items that should be prioritized. That way you
But
get a
that's-
shot at putting it in.
Yeah, and I would just suggest we keep the dredging separately, because it's such a big, massive item.
Yeah, so I understand what you're,
Yeah.
I understand, yeah, I'm with you on that, Vice Mayor, and I understand what you're saying, Mayor Alphen, with regards to identifying infrastructure, but if our goal today is to actually put in objectives, to me, that's a really high level, but that doesn't really move the needle. So in my mind, keeping the canal analysis moving forward is probably something that should remain in our strategic action plan. But then we're also looking at, okay, within stormwater, what should be our goal? When we're looking at road maintenance, what should be our goal? And identifying that on a more granular level so that when he goes back to staff, they actually have something more concrete to work towards.
Yeah, and you make a good point. I mean, you're moving from the broader, more general to the more specific
Right.
and actionable as you
Sure.
go from mission goals to.
So let me change my words
Yeah,
again then, so.
Objectives are smart, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound.
So I'm going to say then, instead of, and I agree with Councilwoman Pontieri, so I would change my words to road repair and safety and swale maintenance, which is part of stormwater mitigation, of course, as priorities. And remember, each of us has our own, you know, coming from a different set of priorities.
And I'm on board with both of those. I know we're looking for consensus.
May I ask you, did I leave anything out that's kind of, I wasn't prepared to go into the granular level, but is there anything big? I don't want to exclude something from this list that's really, you know, have we left anything huge out?
Yeah, I mean, one of my goals, I would like to see how we can address the swale flooding. I know I've talked to staff about figuring out a way to get a VACCON crew in staff, or if we contract it out, whatever it may be. I think probably in this regard, a VACCON crew in-house would be cheaper. But that being said, that's what their job is, right?
Yeah.
To figure that out.
The operations.
But I think that swale, I don't know if I want to call it maintenance, because it's not really the regrading and all of
no,
that.
no,
But
give me
addressing swale flooding quicker, Because right now, we have people on 2- and 3-year cycles to
Swe-
get their swales
Improving
cleaned.
swale performance?
Yeah, that's perfect, improving swale performance, because waiting 2 and 3 years is not acceptable. So we got to figure out a way to solve that.
It's the whole initiative that needs to be relooked at. Okay, I'm trying to just help you move the needle. Good, okay.
Maybe do road repair safety as 03 and then do swales as 04.
That's fine.
You don't mind.
And then what do we come down on the wording for the, because we want to make sure we have saltwater swale and freshwater swales, or saltwater canals are different than the swale maintenance piece. And I think that was lost in what you've written down there, so I want to make sure we don't lose that.
And 05, that's why I like specific issues, specific objectives.
Okay.
As opposed to multiple issues in the same objective. So how would you like to articulate that one?
Which one's left out, the saltwater?
Fresh, I think.
I think just continuing on with the saltwater analysis,
Well, I
the
think
dredging.
continuing on with moving forward on dredging, which the next step and then the step after, and then we got to find some money. And so it's a bit of a process.
It
It's
is.
not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, it is. But I want to make sure we have consensus on all these.
Saltwater dredging initiative?
Yes. Very separate item. I think that's what we finally have gotten to that point of separating.
Right.
Allows more focus.
I agree with you that, and these are all major capital project issues, and they do deserve their own objective in my.
Okay. Unless somebody has another one, I'd like to throw another one out, but if somebody else has next one.
Go ahead.
I'd like to improve the city's ability to communicate our working agenda to the public. I think we're lacking in our ability to effectively communicate what city council is working on and doing with regard to the budget and our various initiatives. Somebody help me with that.
It's a tough one because
Sure it is.
putting out information, and we put out information through Facebook, through Nextdoor, through the newspapers, through televising
Yep.
these hearings, through doing our town halls, but it's sort of, you can't force people to read it or watch it.
Right.
And it's a tough one because folks, they're busy with their lives, they're busy with their kids, their grandkids, retirement, working, running a business, and they kind of count on us to kind of, they elect us and hope we do the right thing, and then if they're not happy
So I
with us
accept
4
that,
years
but
later,
we
they blame
we
us.
continue to come to those folks that come to our meetings, and that seems to be a constant theme, that they are not aware
Right.
of information that
And,
we
and
are.
it's hard. It's
It's
very,
very
very
hard, sure.
hard. And if you put something out there, you get lots of people on Nextdoor arguing about whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. I've gotten to the point where I really don't look much at it anymore. So I don't know how we can improve our messaging. We
Okay.
don't have, well, and the world's got, it's back when we were younger, I won't include anyone else on that, David, but there was limited amount of media. There was the newspaper, there were a few TV stations, there were radio stations, and that's where everybody got their source from. Now it's, thanks to these things, cell phones and computers, it's endless. And
So-
I'm not sure that goal that you're looking
Okay.
for is
Is city council
Attainable.
comfortable that we are as good as we can get in this area of
always room for
communication?
improvement, I think, but I do think one of the things that we did this year that was different was our town hall meetings that are going on. I know, I don't know if all of us has done it yet. I think you're coming up soon.
I've been doing them for 3 years, but
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think that to continue that effort is
Yep.
a good goal.
Good. Yep.
But I don't think that we can sit here with a master plan on how to get information out there because we're already doing it. And I don't think there's a way to force people,
Right.
unless you want to get on TikTok or something and make silly little videos of,
Count me in.
here's the mayor feeding his horse today or something like that,
So what do you all think about communication?
I have a
And I'm not
suggestion.
suggesting we get
No,
on
no.
TikTok, by
Yeah,
the way. I
yeah.
just want to take that off the table.
I have a suggestion.
Yes.
I think we need to work towards having an app for the city that connects directly with the citizens. There's a lot of cities that do it. I think it's through gogov.com, if I could be wrong. And I forwarded on to staff. But the challenge right now, I think, is and I believe Mayor Holland put, and I could be wrong, Nick, you'd be the best person to confirm or deny this, but I think there was a freeze on certain technology improvements at one time that put us behind a little bit from a staff perspective on efficiencies within the technology that they use and the upgrades. And so I look at this as being a little bit more broad and doing a technology analysis for the city to see if there are upgrades that will make us more efficient and help us to save money in the long run, in addition to looking at implementing an app that people can have, to your point, Vice Mayor, at their fingertips. They get push notifications from the city. Oh, look, the agenda was just released, things like that, so that we are looking at, from a staff perspective, what's needed on a technology level, and from our perspective in communicating with the public, that what's needed on a technology level.
Could we broaden that a little bit to also include our ability to respond to our citizens with customer service requests? Because I know we have had difficulty, and I know
And I think
Lauren
that
and
would
I
be
have
wrapped in.
discussed
Yeah.
that. Yes, wrap that in, because one of the biggest complaints we all get is, oh yeah, I got online and I filled this out and no one ever got back to me, and we hear it here
Yeah.
when people come to the
Yep.
podium, and I know Lauren recognizes we have a problem in part of our system and we need to do a sort of overall. So I think if you wrap that all together, because it's part of customer relations,
It is.
customer services, I think that's a good goal.
Yeah, I think an overall technology analysis from an internal staff perspective and from an external relationship with our residents perspective is probably a pretty good goal, and something that you can go back to staff with and say, okay, now what's the next step? How do we get there?
And there'll be pieces
Joe, does
of
that give
getting
you,
us
can
there,
you
right?
condense
Yeah.
that into a
Fix that,
theme?
do this new.
Optimize citizen information engagement
Okay. Pretty fancy.
and including the response.
Customer service response, I
And
guess, or
maybe
something.
maybe IE app, because that actually gets you to a finish
Yeah.
line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I don't want-
The old take a picture of the pothole you just repaired and text it to the person who called.
yeah, there you go.
In a sense, when Amazon drops a package off at your
You do,
door,
you
they
get-
snap a
that's
picture,
right,
right?
you do. You get a picture of
And
it.
so I love that idea, like, yes, we just fixed your pothole, boom,
Cool
there's
guys
a
been doing that
result,
for years.
Yeah. But I don't want to leave staff, the internal analysis of technology for staff purposes out of this either. So I think that it's still an overall technology analysis for the entire organization, both externally and internally.
So, do you mind if I break that into a separate objective?
No, not at all. I just don't want to leave it out.
So how about, almost like a technology CIP for the organization? Technology audits and then a
Yeah, an
CIP,
audit.
so that you're able to assess what are the technology needs and how we best fund and implement them. Well, you've already got through 7, and they're pretty important in terms of aligning with the data, so.
I'm-
And two,
You can
Okay,
be.
so-
Would you like to be?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a few different priorities, and my number one would be economic development, jobs and employment. Also, an enhanced transportation system, and workforce and senior housing.
can we first do the economic development discussion then?
You're the facilitator.
And let's get that into an objective.
Good.
Because there are 3 different.
Go ahead, lead us.
So, and I don't know exactly 100% where the city is at on economic development today, so I don't want to, so forgive me if I say this incorrectly, Is it developing the economic development plan or initiative? Is it continuing what we're doing? Is it expanding and adding tools and resources to it? In other words, I'm
Yes.
I'm not an expert. I'm not
Okay, Joe, you got to talk into the mic for me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Not an expert into what you're currently undertaking on your economic development.
So,
you know.
Councilwoman, can you give us a couple of details that help you define economic development? What would make
Well-
up economic development for you?
We would be looking for better paying jobs, corporate enterprises, and just a stronger workforce system where there is more job availability and higher paying jobs.
So we're talking about a corporate search for employers that would accomplish those things that you're
Yes.
asking for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you, Councilwoman. I think that we would be ultimately, to answer Dr. Saviak's question, continuing onward with our prior initiative, because that was our initiative, was, how do we improve economic development? How do we get more corporations here? How do we diversify our tax base by bringing in more commercial? And then we unfortunately lost our economic development director, which we've now filled that position. So I think that we're in a good place to continue onward with that initiative. I do think to address the last part of that was we have to dedicate some resources to it. So if that means incentives, if that means certain deferred tax breaks, whatever it means in order to make that happen, we have to understand that there's got to be dedicated funding for that as well. So I agree with you, and I think that we can continue onward with what's currently in the SAP, particularly now that we have that job filled.
You had two others.
Oh, workforce transportation.
So let's, if we can, let's go
Well,
slow,
transportation.
transportation. So we'll
Okay.
need to define for him what we mean by that.
Actually, a more enhanced transportation system, because I speak to a lot of seniors again, and they are concerned that the bus services, they're just not equipped to service them properly.
So we're looking for more rides for more people.
Yes,
Is
yes.
that a county bus service that we're dealing with initially, right now? So
Well,
we don't-
I shouldn't, I
We don't
assume
have a
that's,
Well,
city
right now,
sort
we
of
just
service.
have, Flagler County Transportation.
so you want to explore a increase in ridership through a city transportation program,
Yeah.
perhaps in conjunction with the county.
Yeah, and it would not only be for seniors. I mean,
No,
you
no.
have young
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people, I mean, the whole
Because
entire.
there are any number of new possibilities in terms of,
Rideshare.
what is it?
Rideshare apps. And
Yeah,
in the past, we've
exactly.
discussed that perhaps being a liaison for individuals who aren't the most technologically savvy to be able to use Uber,
Right.
Lyft, and these type of services, that we could provide that liaison service to be able to say, hey, here's a phone number that you can call from the city where we'll have, a nice person answer the phone that can facilitate that process. Because I think there's a disconnect between individuals who aren't the savviest with their phones and then being able to set up an Uber account or Lyft account. Or they might only have a check or cash or things like this.
And there's some good success in some cities that have been in the press lately. There are a much wider variety of ways to increase the number of rides that are available, old or young. I mean, it doesn't really discriminate that way, but it would enhance an underserved public, which is what you're hearing now.
So Nick, are you
Yes.
talking about setting up some sort of city-assisted training program to help those folks with?
In the past, we had discussed even just having like a dedicated customer support representative that we manned a different phone number that if someone was calling, that we could potentially walk them through the process or even set it up on their behalf. It varies because the level of assistance that we need to offer to make that a successful trip varies on the person's ability to use the technology. But then there's also other issues as well, because basically that person is accountable for payment, pickup, drop off, all of these things. It offers a couple of challenges, but it is very financially difficult to offer like a fixed route bus system. And at the county level, even the shuttle system that they have with the small bus, I think they've eliminated that program. piggybacking some of the rideshare opportunities might be the most feasible and prudent way to be able to get that done. Because I wholeheartedly agree that there are people who have difficulties traversing our city because of their lack of transportation and the
Our
ability.
whole county.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering if this is something that we do as part of that joint effort with
Yeah.
our, surrounding communities in the county
Sure.
to possibly help educate, and most of the folks that are going to have the difficult time
And
are
and
older.
the public-private concept plays into this, is what I've been reading about frequently.
So I'm wondering if by bringing everyone on board through what both Ms. Pontieri and the mayor do with that Flagler Beach sort of, Bunnell sort of, whatever it is. What do we call that? I don't even remember what we call it.
Intergovernmental,
Yeah, all
I
right,
can't even
something
remember
like
now,
that,
but
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, but our neighbors.
I'm with
And
you.
working with our neighbors to set up something, and I would be very much in favor of jointly, offering some sort of classes, whether through Park and Recreations or through something else at our community center, where folks that are a little, because you do see people with flip phones that don't use these things, and they're older usually.
Big buttons on them.
But then again, you see some, you see some older people that just can text faster than you and I can, Nick, so, because they communicate with their grandkids and stuff, but I would be very much in favor of doing that type of community work to help people with. Now, ride sharing, though, I'm a little confused. What is ride sharing?
I just mean like Lyft and Uber.
Oh, okay, you're not
rideshare
talking
apps.
about, hey, Fred down the street will give you a
No,
ride.
no,
I don't
no,
want to
no,
get into
no,
any
no, no, but
issues.
there are models which are being experimented with and in use by some other cities that are proving to be quite effective. I mean, there's dollar rides, there are business models out there that rely on a rather small investment from the municipality, but also require grants, which there are grants available. And then there's a business model for the transit company itself. So there, like I said, we're not inventing the wheel here. We can look at some others to see what might fit our communities, as I think is a good way to look at it regionally to make it work.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll also bring it up at, I happen to have TPO tomorrow, because they have some expertise in that, and I'll bring back to staff whatever information, reference sources they have regarding this. Okay, good. Good one. And you have one more.
Also,
And in the third window, we have.
these senior housing and workforce housing.
So that plays directly to economic development, because if you don't have a place for them to sleep, they're not going to be able to work here, and the companies are not going to be able to hire them. So do you want to be more specific about a definition here so we're not confusing anybody?
It's a hard subject, because on the workforce housing, which we need, I mean, if we're going to attract more businesses need a younger workforce. We can't dictate to property owners, you must build apartments, you must build this. I think we have to find incentives or encouragement along the way. I know on the senior housing, we have some that is being looked at here in Town Center. What's it called? I forget what the name of that legislation is that came out.
Live local.
Live local, which is, I think, an excellent, a fabulous idea to help our seniors that, at this point in their life, again, you have people that, have lost Social Security because a spouse died and, whatever the reason may be.
But you have it at both ends of the spectrum.
And that live
You
local,
have on
by
the
the
young
way.
side, you have a restriction on how much a young family can actually earn until they, to get started, which is also a favorable
On the
potential
Live Local,
employee.
I thought Live Local was for 62 and up.
No.
It's not. That's a portion.
That's
but
only that
it's
one project.
One
Oh, that's-
piece.
all right.
But there are
So
many
Live
different
Local
facets.
is, again, when I was going to say
Across the board.
62 years old,
Yeah.
you're still part of a lot of folks are part of the workforce.
Yeah.
At 70,
Yes,
we
yeah.
have folks part of the workforce, so that is helping with workforce housing. I didn't know there was a younger aspect to it. That's great.
Well, a non-age restricted. In other
Non-age
words,
restricted.
it's more about the affordability of the dwelling.
But we're not getting into Section 8 or anything with that.
No, I
It's just
didn't-
Live
no.
Local.
Right.
Okay,
So-
that's fabulous.
Yeah, so I got to give some pushback on this one, because Live Local specifically states that we lose the ability to combat the conversion from commercial property to multifamily housing. And that's where I have an issue because to your point, we can't say that we're furthering economic development while at the same time saying we're also in favor of the state of Florida telling us that we have to use commercially zoned property for residential. So while I understand the point in wanting to make sure we have workforce housing, which I do think is important, I think the first step in this is to analyze what we actually do have, because can anybody sit up here right now and tell me what the availability is for, for instance, or do we have 75% of senior housing available for residents right now? Do we have 62% of workforce housing available right now that isn't being utilized? I don't know the answer to that
Yeah, I
question.
don't know the answer either.
So-
I mean, are you asking, so for example, if you were to ask, do we have housing right now listed for sale? Do we have housing less than $200,000? I can tell you that it's an incredibly small percentage of the inventory.
I agree with you there. Housing, yes.
Yeah.
But we're also talking about apartments too. I mean, so, and we know, we just approved quite a few final plats, so I don't know what the price point of those are. But I also know that we have some apartments coming in, specifically to Town Center. So I think the first step in this, before we say, well, let's go ahead and start, enhancing this and put out to the public that we're doing that, because I don't want that to be the public narrative, why don't we do an analysis of what we have coming in, and I would say the next 6 to 12 months, and what we know the demand is. I think that's got to be
So what you're
step
looking at
number
is the
one.
absorption rate of the newly constructed units, which is easily available, and we can know that, yeah.
Now, I-
And also what's coming, like not just what we have
Right.
that's currently able to be,
Well, what we're
bought, rented,
forecasting,
whatever.
you know,
but-
assuming that it goes
exactly.
forward, yeah.
Correct.
I did have some questions on the Live Local, because I was not aware of the younger
Yep.
version of it. It's still the same law, still part of the same law and the same rules apply.
Same it's still same of the
legislation.
legislative
And that's gone
package.
back 2 times to Tallahassee, correct?
Correct.
And the governor and the legislature.
Still needs some fine tuning.
Right, but we can't, in a sense, though, we're kind of stuck following it.
No, well.
No, that's why we've got council coming before us to
yeah,
tell us
I'm
how
not
we
sure.
can, how we can have more control over that process. Because if we don't have a certain percentage of commercial in the city, then we are somewhat insulated from those rules. But somewhat. It doesn't completely.
Okay.
It
I'll
doesn't
wait for
completely
council,
insulate
I
it.
guess,
Yeah.
to-
Let's wait for
get
the
into
presentation, because
specifications
we're
of
guessing
it.
right now. Let's
Yeah.
wait, the presentation would be very helpful.
But I think, though, that the Live Local, again, with seniors who are part of the workforce, that is workforce housing, and you see a lot of seniors out there still working. You just need to walk into any of our department stores or grocery
No,
stores.
I'm looking at one
Walmart.
now.
Huh?
I'm looking at one
Yeah,
now.
you're looking at
zing.
one now, yeah.
Oh,
You're looking
man.
in the mirror, you're looking at yourself, too.
Every morning.
Touche.
Like it or not.
I would expect that from Clufus, not from you, David.
Couldn't help it.
But I did not know about the younger part of it.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah, because
could be very
what they're
exciting.
looking to do is put a price cap
Yeah.
for the long term for some benefit to the builder, develop whatever up front, which holds it.
They're working but
Yep.
not making high incomes, but they are working.
It would allow more people at younger incomes to purchase dwelling units.
And again, it's important to be able just to have a place to live. I mean, like when I got out of college, and then got out of the military, I didn't buy,
Yeah.
my dream home. I
No,
mean, I
but
rented.
you can't work if you don't have a place to sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
And Councilwoman, I absolutely get the pushback, which I think, waiting for that, let's ask all of our questions when we have that presentation, so that we understand
When
it
are we gonna
better.
have that
I think it's
presentation?
coming up fairly soon, right?
It's scheduled for June.
June, okay,
A workshop?
Yes, sir.
good, very good.
And my last comment is to Vice Mayor Danko. I agree with you that the town halls are very effective, and it also puts us in front of the community and allows us to have direct contact, and we are able to get feedback from the community. So I think it's really important that we continue to do them.
This is working exactly as it should. It's, you get, when we do the interviews, we hear from you individually, but then when you get to the, today, you're having that collective discussion and exchange of ideas, and the creative problem-solving process, and
Let's
that's
just
what's
be-
great about strategic
Let's
planning.
just be clear to your point, that if we have overlooked something that may be very well significant, that we will be returning to this document that you're writing and be able to add to it. Because
100%.
I'm not convinced that we have been thorough and identified every important issue that this council would like to address.
Yeah, this comes back before you
Okay.
as a council. Like I said, there's real value to speaking with you individually as policymakers, which we did. And then there's real value to having this, collective discussion, which also is, invites the community to, observe, right? So, yes, there will be additional opportunities if you go, hey, I think we missed something, or I think we could modify that or adjust that. Absolutely.
So there are a couple things, Mayor, that I did want to bring up that we've discussed, but I don't think we've hit on them. If we go back to the list that is up on the screen, there's two things that I think can be addressed simultaneously. That's specific funding for Arts District as its own entity, and then also funding Fire Station 22 to be converted into a historical center. So that's very specific, obviously, but I think that if we look at a funding mechanism for arts, cultural, and history as a priority, it can kind of encompass the more specific goal of what do we do at Fire Station 22. And I know we have a presentation coming back to us about parking at the community center and all that, so that could almost already be addressed. But we have continuously had this issue with funding arts. And so I think we do need to make it a priority. How do we find a mechanism a funding mechanism that specifically goes only to arts, cultural, and the history of our city? So I would look for consensus on focusing in on that analysis.
So the only question I have, just so I'm clear, when you add the arts and kind of the cultural piece to the historical piece, is that our understanding that they haven't over time been a part of one entity? They've been somewhat separate.
I think that's part of the problem, though.
I agree,
Well-
and that's why, absolutely, that was part of the reason that
Okay,
we needed to break it out in its own entity.
Again, I'm kind of with you, Mr. Mayor, on this. I see these as two separate sort of things. And again, on the fire station, I don't think we have a cost analysis on what it's going to cost to bring that up to code.
but I mean, combining them, but
and we
combining
haven't
them
made a
under
decision
one
on the
umbrella, I don't have a problem combining them under one umbrella, but it may be dependent on more than one organization.
Yeah.
And that's okay, if that's all right, then I get it. And I'm
That
okay.
could be, but I guess that's where, we got to start somewhere.
Yep,
And
I'm good.
we've had all these different organizations
Yep.
through the years try to raise money here and there, and I mean, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can collectively help them join resources, or if we as a city can even implement. I know there are cities around this state that implement we're talking very small impact fees, but on large commercial projects that bring in a lot of money. So I want to say Sarasota, but I can't remember specifically. They have a plan like this. There's plans around the state where they say, hey, you know what, we're going to do a half impact fee on commercial projects over $1 million that specifically goes to arts. And can fund things in the city. And so that's just one example. It's not a huge impact to that one project, but it's a lot of money that's dedicated to one initiative.
So it's a
in the
revenue
city.
source is
It
really
is.
at the guts of this, okay.
Yeah, so
How would
now,
you like to articulate that?
I think,
I hear
I'm gonna let the
arts, cultural- I hear
attorneys
arts,
spell that one
I
out.
hear arts, cultural, historical preservation.
I think identifying a funding source.
And honest to goodness, I didn't want to put it all into one, but when I was proposing the solar evaluation, that's where my mind was going, was that the specific earmarks that I had mentioned were for something art district related. I didn't want to kind of get that all jumbled together, but you're absolutely right that a dedicated funding mechanism like a half cent or a impact fee is where the cities that we were trying to aspire to be are going.
Yeah, arts, culture, and history. And if they eventually have to be broken out, then that's what we have to do. But we got to start somewhere.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
And then the other thing that I didn't want to leave off is we did this wonderful parks master plan analysis. It looks like staff is largely on board with, I think the top response from staff regarding that was to start implementing that. I don't want that to fall off. We spent a lot of money and a lot of time.
So would we want to maintain our current very high ranking with regard to the quality of the trail system and the parks?
Well, I think, well, obviously.
find a metric for it.
Yes, but I think actually formulating a plan to implement the Parks Master Plan is important. So we got this study done. We know what our citizens want us to do. We know what staff thinks is a good idea. Let's actually make a plan based on that and start implementing it.
So revenue source.
Well, we're going to need a revenue source, obviously.
Okay, all right.
But, I mean, I don't want to leave that out because we obviously, and this goes, I think, hand in hand with the westward expansion too.
Well,
We know
also the
what goal
quality of
is for
life
that.
item that we had earlier on the list. This is as much a part of your quality of life
Yeah.
as any other item on the list.
So is there another objective beyond 11?
Yeah.
How would you like to articulate that?
Implementing the Parks Master Plan.
Yeah, so you've got a plan, so implementation, yeah, good way. And
That came back,
remember, quality of life, that, you're going to have a couple that get combined on that.
Right.
Okay,
And I think that quality of life goes into 11 as well.
I agree.
Can we add availability of medical care under quality of life? Because
So,
it's not
listen,
on.
no, I know we need it. Now, I'm trying to be realistic. So, do we want to, okay, what is our ability as a city, other than, do you want to put together packages of incentives to inspire medical practitioners to come to Palm Coast? I'm trying to figure out how you would do such a thing. I feel like it's a little bit outside of our scope, but I could be wrong.
I think it would go under economic development.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's part of what we did, right? Because we did a study on feasibility.
Yep.
It's a part of the feasibility study. So I think naturally, Councilwoman Hyder, that, and I'm fairly certain that the results that we've been getting or received, I can't remember the exact timeline of it, say that medical is something that we should dive into here in this city.
Well, remember,
So-
part of our
It's an
brand is
issue.
healthcare service
Yeah.
training.
Spotlight that
Healthcare
within the economic
services,
development,
yeah.
Objective, you want to spotlight that within the economic development.
I think that's
Yeah.
what Councilwoman Hyder is
Okay.
suggesting, yes. So that gets in there, yeah.
Healthcare focus.
Acting City Manager, if you could, I can't remember, did we get the full feasibility study back yet, or is it still in process? I
The
just don't
targeted
remember.
industry, it comes back later this summer.
Okay, so perfect.
Right.
That'll address it,
Okay.
I think.
Did you have another one that we might have glossed over? I mean, like I said, this may in fact be incomplete at this point, but not a bad start.
If I could say so, you're doing great. I mean, like I said, I apologize because, during the interviews, you may be going, well, I'm just repeating what I said during the interview, but you're getting the benefit of having the discussion, the collaboration, the exchange of ideas, and then also building unified council support for your specific objectives too, and saying, hey, that needs to be in the plan, and the staff team needs to develop implementation plans for that and needs to execute,
Next step.
So after this, what we'll do is work with staff to operationalize these into like one-pager, summary plans. So in other words, you get a sense of all the major elements that would be required for successful implementation. And then the entire document will come back before you again for discussion, review, revision, and approval. And at that point, you decide what you decide, and then you tell the team, hey, it's off to the races. These are the objectives that are going to drive our operations or our organization. This is going to be our focus. This is going to be align. These priorities we're going to align everything we do here as a city with these priorities, and this is what we want to concentrate on.
Okay.
For the next 5 years.
Yep.
To ensure long-term sustained success.
Good. And when is our next contact or next?
We're tentatively scheduling it for your May 28th budget workshop.
So that's a ways off, okay.
We've got to also get the results from the annual citizen
Yeah,
survey that comes
okay.
May 10th.
Yeah,
Right.
okay, so we've got plenty of time to ponder over this list. Now, this list will get out to us in a more refined manner or soon,
We definitely can do that.
in advance of the next workshop, just so we can have it to work on.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, good.
Yeah, well in advance of
Okay.
that. And like I said, I apologize for plowing the same ground again, but, you know, we had the benefit of the individual interviews, the electronic survey, the research on the community and the organization, but there's nothing that is a substitute for what you're doing for right now, which is having these meaningful, discussions and creative problem solving as a leadership team on how do we move the city forward, and by selecting the right specific set of objectives that are going to allow us to have the Palm Coast that we all love and want generations to always enjoy and experience.
Okay.
So,
Can I push just a little bit harder on the list? If we are getting back the survey results on the 10th, I would kind of like this refined list by that time so that we
Okay.
can compare this to what our residents have
Right.
spoken out about.
So, Dr. Savick, I'd like to thank you for facilitating the exercise. I'd also like to thank each of my fellow city council members for having, I think, a realistic, genuine conversation about what each of us has heard from the public and what we each think. But I think having this realistic dialogue is incredibly energizing for this process. So I thank each one of you for that. I appreciate it. And obviously for staff for having their input, and through city manager, sharing all of that with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Saviak, and thank you to everybody up here for the discourse. I appreciate it.
it's been an outstanding team effort, and we're looking forward to moving.
So while I still have you near the podium, I would open up this item for public comment. If there was anybody in the public that would like to comment at this time on the exercise that we just went through. There's much more to come, so yes, sir.
I apologize, Mr. Fuller.
Dr. Saviak, I don't never need to apologize to me. Ed Fuller, Palm Coast. Some of the things that you talked about, affordable housing, when you require a builder to have two garages, that's not affordable housing. One-car garage, you knock the price down, right? It's not rocket science, but I mean, the size of the houses, some of the zoning changes you may have to undertake, you need to think about that because the footprint is different, right? So the requirements that you have a builder right now, if you relax some of those things and ease up, a young child, or a young kid, a young adult, well, he needs one car. They might have 10,000 people that visit them, but one-car garage would reduce the price of that house for sure. And I think it's a start, I guess, as far as funding goes. And the other thing I'd like to say is that the conversations you all had, that's exactly what you need to do at the start of this, not at the end. And it's one of those deals where we have a growing community. And you can't cut services. Just can't do it. And there are no sacred cows. When you talk about if there is a sacred cow, you better look at everything. And that's really, really, truly important. Everybody is on as far as review goes, do we do this carte blanche? No. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do that. So I really appreciated this dialogue today. It was really, really fascinating. Dr. Saviak, great job. That was really cool. As usual, it's 10 places over my head, but I sure do like all his graphics and things like that. But the conversation was really good. And then obviously, the more you talk about it, the more understanding you have. But you can't do it without money. Infrastructure takes money. It just is. And, technology, it takes money. Roads, it takes money. So those are all things you really need to, you can't cut services and cut your budget. Can't do it. It just doesn't make sense. So thank you all for that really engaging conversation today. It was really helpful for me. And those dashboards that you all have, see, as I do attend those Citizens Academy, they're outstanding. I mean, I thought I knew a lot of that stuff that existed, but now that I really see it, it's really eye-opening. It's amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Any other members of the public want to comment at this time?
Steve Carr, Palm Coast. As I listen, I've been enlightened quite a bit about the term quality of life, okay? Quality of life, as far as the way the city looks at quality of life, is totally different than the way residents look at quality of life for a residential neighborhood. And then it's still different for how a resident looks at quality of life personally. And so quality of life is being thrown around quite a bit, and yet there's quite a difference in how they are looked at. Quality of life for the city, I would say, is pretty good. Quality of life for the majority of the residential neighborhoods, I would say, is pretty good. But not all the residential neighborhoods have a good quality of life. And if they don't, then that is affecting those individuals in that neighborhood. So I don't know how to tell you to address that. But there is a difference. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other members of the public? Yes, sir.
Greg Johnston. I don't know why I'm up here. I just feel like I have to say that.
Doctor, do me a favor, just pull the mic up just a little. There you go. Thank you.
You might want to put it on the pedestal. It might make it easier.
I'm sorry.
Put it up top and you don't have to bend over. There you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Perfect.
And just pull it closer.
There we go.
Thank you. So many things came up. You guys, I wish you'd all just stay here because you're doing a great job. I really enjoyed the discussions you had, and I'd hear one person say one thing, I say, yeah, that's right, and then I'd hear the next person say exactly the opposite, and I say, yeah, that's right. So you're doing a great job. Just a couple of comments. The taxes, maybe you could, hold homestead differently than investment. If you don't have homestead, then every property that's out there is an investment. So they expect to read this into the investment, and they're going to be willing to pay a little more taxes. We need the money. I've had discussions with people on the board here, and it's always about the money. So you need the money. If your property values are going up $30,000 a year, you can afford to pay a couple $100 extra each year in taxes. But if you're homestead and you're an older person that is hurting, then maybe you take that as a different thing. You don't raise them as much. I have investment property. I would expect to pay a little bit more in investment property. Dredging, it's always been a problem since I've been here. It's always been on the agenda, what to do. Well, I'd suggest you dredge the middle of the canals, and then everything from the docks over the seawalls, the property owner's responsibility, and you need to hold them accountable so that they're not just pushing dirt back into the middle of the canal. The healthcare I'm personally involved in, and we really need to get rid of the monopoly of the healthcare we have in the county. We need to have more options and bring in more healthcare situations to where Advent Health. I saw a lot of patients in my office, and they were always complaining about the lack of healthcare options that they had. And then I'm agreeable, and I think we ought to try for a cultural, historical tax on properties. I think that has a chance to go through. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Dodson.
Yeah.
Anyone else? All right, with that, then I'll close public participation for the presentation that we just had. Are there any public comments with regard to items that were not discussed on today's agenda?
At Fuller Palm Coast, and I hope Captain Stapleford is listening, but hopefully Fine can give us more money this year. He's always been an outstanding supporter, and that party he threw last week was outstanding. Thank you for all of you coming. It was a great representation of Palm Coast really represents well. All our city officials were there, all our employees were there. It's nice to see us represented. That's a big deal. You know, we're not a redheaded stepchild anymore. And I believe we're a first-class city. And to act that way, when you have your public officials and you have city employees and county officials show up, it's a big deal. It's huge. Because I'm sure those fine commissioners, when they go to their cities, I'll bet they don't have the same overwhelming presence that we do. So congrats to everyone over here. Captain Stapleford, if you're watching me on TV, we need more money. And, you know, put that on your thing and your objectives. And yeah, you did an amazing job, Ambassador for the city of Palm Coast. Thank you very much.
Hey,
Thank
Ed,
you.
every time I see Randy, I ask him for more money. I just want you
Thank
to know
you.
that. And Randy, I know you're
All
listening.
right.
We need
Thank-
more money.
Thank you for your comment. No city attorney is today, so acting city manager, any final comments to take us out today? Anything coming up on the schedule this weekend that you would like to pronounce?
We have a Keep Palm Coast Clean event on Sunday, and we are celebrating Trails Day on Saturday
Correct.
at Waterfront Park.
So you're going to make the weather perfect, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's been perfect this week so far.
Very good. And I apologize, I didn't ask city council members. Any final comments for today?
Well, now that you asked, no.
Please.
I'd just like to comment to Mr. Ed Fuller about the comments you made about the housing. Another alternative to that, and I was speaking to Mr. Tyner in a meeting, and he didn't refer to the housing as workforce housing or affordable housing, but he referred to it as life stage housing. So the comment you made about having a one-car garage opposed to a two-car garage, I see nothing wrong with having two-bedroom homes with a one-car garage instead of three-bedroom homes, depending on where you are at a particular time in your life. And that could cut the cost down for the building and the cost for people that want to work and live here in Palm Coast. So that was just a thought, but thank you so much for your comment.
I would just like to send a heartfelt thank you to everyone who reached out to me and expressed their condolences. My father passed away last week, and I appreciate everyone who reached out. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the support. It means the world to me. Thank you.
You have our best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, then I guess I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Vice Mayor has made a motion to adjourn. I have a second from
I'm in.
somebody?
Seconded,
From
third.
Councilman Clufus, so we are adjourned. Thank you.